Chapter 1064. It was quiet in the small reception room on the top floor of the castle. The smoke lingered in the air. Li Tianlan smoked and looked at Xianyuan Wushang, who was sitting in front of him. Qin Weibai sat next to Li Tianlan, and also looked at the fat man attentively. Xing Tian stood motionless behind Xianyuan Wushang. His huge body was straight like a statue. The atmosphere was subtle and solemn. For both Qin Weibai and Li Tianlan, it was not until now that they could really calm down and think about something. It had been less than 24 hours since Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian arrived. But their appearance brought too many incredible and incomprehensible variables to Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace. Their appearance was inexplicable, but their role was obvious. If Xing Tian's arrow in East Island hadn't changed those things, Li Tianlan wouldn't have been able to find the break of reincarnation all over the sky in a short time. So when facing the sneak attack of Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu, he would have been in a real desperate situation. Without Xianyuan Wushang's so-called hometown specialty, he couldn't have broken through to the invincible realm now. So Li Tianlan was probably no match for Wang Shengxiao when he came to Emperor Dong's palace today. Li Tianlan's breakthrough was perfect. The burden on his body had been completely solved. His current physical strength was strong enough to support him to stabilize his current realm, and even reach the peak of the invincible realm. If the realm he broke through to this time could still be called the invincible realm, countless mysteries shrouded Xianyuan Wushang. Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai could both feel his kindness and closeness to Emperor Dong's palace, but they also wanted to know his origin and his various means. "You saved me." Li Tianlan put out the cigarette in the ashtray in front of him and said softly. Xianyuan Wushang scratched his head honestly. "You're my big brother. It's natural for me to save you." "Yes." Li Tianlan nodded, narrowed his eyes and asked with a smile. "Then why am I your big brother?" "Big brother is big brother." "Why?" Xianyuan Wushang looked surprised. "This fat man is very good at pretending to be crazy. If he doesn't want to say, it's hard for us to get anything out of him." Qin Weibai said grumpily. Xianyuan Wushang laughed, looking very simple and honest. "Then be more specific. From East Island to Beihai, from Beihai to Tiannan, you took me here in a few minutes, or even a few seconds. How did you do that?" Li Tianlan asked calmly. After a pause he continued. "This is not martial arts." He sounded very sure. East Island, Beihai, Tiannan. It was difficult for him to calculate the exact distance in such a short time, but he was sure that no martial arts could achieve this. Even if he had entered that supreme realm, even if he had reached the peak of that realm, it was still impossible for him to achieve this. It was not a lack of stamina. If Li Tianlan were to walk this distance, he could also reach the destination in a very short time. It would not be slower than taking a plane, and he had enough physical strength. But the speed of the plane couldn't compare to Xianyuan Wushang's speed. Even Wu Qing, when fully charged, wouldn't be able to keep up with Xianyuan Wushang, let alone an airplane. "It's a quantum network." Xianyuan Wushang's answer was very calm. He had nothing to hide from Li Tianlan. After all, this was his territory, the territory of the space-time corridor. No one was watching him here, and he didn't want to pretend to be mysterious in front of Li Tianlan. He could say what he could, and there was nothing he could do if he couldn't. Li Tianlan didn't stare blankly. Neither did Qin Weibai. Quantum network. Different from the Wang family of Beihai, at this stage, whether it was Emperor Dong's palace or the former Samsara palace, Qin Weibai and Li Tianlan didn't pay too much attention to it. It was a very strange term to them. So Li Tianlan nodded naturally and asked, "What's that?" According to the current understanding of the scientific community, to put it simply, it's a network that is tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of times faster than the current internet. But in fact, it's not like that. The quantum network can't even be described as fast. It's a kind of synchronization that ignores distance. And I could use that in that pair of glasses to build which is equivalent to a small base station. At that moment, I used to create a virtual quantum network space to replace the real one. That is, from that moment on, we were actually equivalent to 2 strings of data in the network. That kind of speed is equivalent to us in the quantum network space. and I sent a text message from Beihai to Emperor Dong's palace in Tiannan. There was no delay, regardless of distance, and it arrived instantly. Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai looked at each other, and their expressions were a little strange. Xianyuan Wushang looked at them quietly. Big brother, sister-in-law, do you understand? It's not that I don't want to say something, but even if I say it, you can't hear it. Li Tianlan looked around with no expression on his face. He could hear most of Xianyuan Wushang's words, but he couldn't hear any of the key words. He could see that Xianyuan Wushang was not perfunctory when he said those key words. But when his voice reached his ears, it completely turned into some fragmented noise, as if some words had been completely blocked. As it was shielded again and again, the surrounding space even began to change silently. Li Tianlan's second heart was slowly vibrating. Most of the time, it was silent for a long time, and would only beat once. It seemed to feel a great crisis and slowly woke up from the silence. Every wisp of air in the surrounding space seemed to be sharpening. Big brother, can you feel it? Xianyuan Wushang looked at Li Tianlan with a strange look in his eyes. Li Tianlan was silent for a while, and then slowly said, "What is it?" He nodded at the surrounding air. This was not the answer, but it was the clearest answer. Xianyuan Wushang's pupils suddenly contracted for a very obvious moment. He looked at Li Tianlan seriously and said again, "You can feel it." Li Tianlan nodded and said yes. Xianyuan Wushang took a deep breath of the sharp air in the air. At the same time, Xing Tian's straight body slightly bent. "What is it?" Li Tianlan repeated his question. Xianyuan Wushang's eyes flickered. He lowered his head and was silent, as if he was hesitating. Li Tianlan glanced at him, and didn't continue to ask. He just changed the topic. "You mean that the so-called quantum network was brought by you?" "Yes." Xianyuan Wushang nodded. "Then what happened just now? Who saved Wang Shengxiao? The method he used seems to be the quantum network you mentioned." Li Tianlan said. "It's different." Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. "The method is the same, but the way he used it is more natural and faster than mine. I built the quantum network with a prop, but in the other team, there is a person who has this ability. There is a big difference." "You know him?" Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. "Who is he?" "His name is Lin Shi." Xianyuan Wushang said helplessly. "This is a deal. Big brother, you were seriously injured in Beihai. The medicine that can help you recover quickly is from Lin Shi's family. And the condition is that Lin Shi also comes here." "Then he chose the Wang family of Beihai?" Li Tianlan's voice was a little cold. "Just kill him." Xianyuan Wushang said casually. "This is just a deal. Now the deal is over. He chose the Wang family of Beihai, so he is the enemy. Big brother, you don't have to worry. Even his family can't say anything." "His family?" Li Tianlan frowned tightly. He remembered it clearly. The moment the virtual network world spread over, Lin Shi suddenly made his move. He also used the shatter of reincarnation. To some extent, his inheritance was the same as Li Tianlan's. His family is not to be trifled with. Xianyuan Wushang smiled. "But no matter what, they can't affect us here. In this matter, my family will fully support you. Compared with us, the power behind Lin Shi has risen for a short time. In terms of foundation, they are far inferior to us. To put it simply, even if the two strongest experts behind him join forces, they will not be a match for my father. In other aspects, they are even more inferior. It's just that the two experts behind Lin Shi have some special experiences, and have great potential in the future. But in terms of potential, big brother, you are not afraid of anyone with your potential." Li Tianlan listened quietly and quickly digested the meaning of these words. "That is to say," Qin Weibai suddenly said, "your family is betting on Tianlan's future potential." "Yes and no." Xianyuan Wushang's eyes were a little complicated. "Big brother's potential has long been realized. What we are waiting for is for him to slowly walk to the position that belongs to him, and take back what belongs to him. Family, he turned the dynasty into a family. But in the end, it was still the dynasty founded by Li Tianlan. The reason that the human clan could linger on until now had too much to do with the original majesty. Everything in the time corridor could be said to be Li Tianlan's. Can the opponent's quantum network be restrained? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. The concept of the so-called family just flashed in his mind. Li Tianlan was a little curious. But it was just pure curiosity. The breakthrough this time really made him stand at the peak. If he took another step forward, Li Tianlan was confident that no one would be a match for him. Then what was there to worry about the so-called family? Lin Shi's means were messy. If he really chose to stand on Beihai's side, Li Tianlan would certainly not let go of a chance. It's very difficult. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. The so-called quantum network was all the means of the order camp. It was omniscient, omnipotent, and everywhere. The doomsday at the top of the order camp could make its army appear in any corner, including the time corridor. Virtual travel had always been one of the most unsolvable abilities. The only thing the time corridor could think of was to restrain it, reduce the network frequency to a certain extent, and even change the physical constants of some important places and so on. What they could do was to limit the strength of the opponent during virtual travel, but there was no way to prevent the opponent from appearing. It was just that the strength that Lin Shi displayed here was already so low that there was no way to restrain him. The only chance to kill him is to kill him with one blow, Xianyuan Wushang said. Li Tianlan nodded thoughtfully and fell silent. The sharpness in the air was still there. Every wisp of air, and even every particle seemed to have a touch of sharpness. Li Tianlan felt a little uncomfortable all over. He pointed to the air in front of him again. What is this? Can't you tell? Or? Xianyuan Wushang hesitated again. I can tell, he whispered. But big brother, are you ready? What do you mean? Li Tianlan asked. Xianyuan Wushang stretched out his hand. Give me your hand. Li Tianlan strangely reached out his hand and held it with him. The sharpness that kept swimming in the air seemed to be gradually increasing, and more. Li Tianlan became more and more uncomfortable. What the hell is this? Xianyuan Wushang smiled. A clear light gushed out of his hand and completely enveloped Li Tianlan. It's malice, Xianyuan Wushang whispered. Bang! Li Tianlan's second heart suddenly beat. Xianyuan Wushang's voice continued. The malice of the world. Puff! The clear light completely enveloped Li Tianlan. Without warning, Li Tianlan's body became stiff. A large amount of blood gushed out of his body along with Xianyuan Wushang's voice. Chapter 1065. It was hard to tell what it felt like. There were no signs, vague, abrupt, and impossible to perceive. The moment Xianyuan Wushang's voice fell, all the blades in the surrounding space became extremely sharp. The air disappeared. In other words, all the air had turned into sharp knives at the microscopic level. Countless sharp knives pierced into his body. As he breathed, they went into his mouth and down his throat. Countless blades seemed to tear everything in his body apart. Every sharp knife seemed to have a soul. It was an extremely weak, almost imperceptible, but infinitely broad will. Cold, gloomy, disgusted, and angry. Everything became sinister in the shortest time possible, turning into the purest form of destruction. Or extermination. Blood gushed out. It gushed out from Li Tianlan's chest and back. It was an extreme viciousness like a curse. Almost in an instant, Li Tianlan suffered unimaginable damage all over his body. Sharp pain swept through him. His mind was clearer than ever. He tightened his grip on his hand. Xianyuan Wushang held his hand tightly. Xianyuan Wushang's body was also gushing with blood. In Li Tianlan's eyes, Xianyuan Wushang's facial features were even cracking bit by bit. His skin was torn open, and tiny but deep lines of blood spread unscrupulously on his face, like centipedes. His body kept shaking in the great injury, but the clear light in his hands kept boiling, completely enveloping the two of them. The light flowed into their wounds, and the enormous energy nourished everything with unimaginable vitality. Their wounds healed and were torn open again and again. In Li Tianlan's sight, Xianyuan Wushang's twisted face turned up slightly, revealing a terrifying sneer. It was unyielding, contempt, and a kind of frivolity and arrogance that came from the bones. His distorted voice came intermittently. World. Ha, 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 ha. Come on. Li Tianlan looked at him quietly. This was the ugliest and most terrifying smile he had ever seen. But in that trembling voice, there was a kind of tenacity that could almost touch the soul. It was a spirit that struggled every moment and never gave up. Li Tianlan's body could not move or exert force. All his martial arts, sword qi, energy, domain, everything was completely frozen and solidified. Bang! Xing Tian's huge body collapsed to the ground. His incomparably thick arms had even sunk into the floor, and countless streams of blood were also flowing from his body. It seemed that everyone who heard Xianyuan Wushang's words were suffering unbearable consequences. Or perhaps he had to bear the malice of this world. Everyone, Li Tianlan's heart suddenly trembled. His body was shaking with all his might, and the wind and thunder veins in his body had been stretched to the extreme. Little by little, he slowly turned his head and looked to his side. By his side, it was Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai was still sitting on the sofa. Her carefully combed hair was elegantly combed, and the moon-white cheongsam wrapped her delicate body, which could make Li Tianlan crazy every time. The sunlight outside the window shone into the small reception room, and shone on her smooth arms, reflecting the soft and white luster that made his mouth dry. At this moment, she gently pressed her forehead with one arm, and she seemed to be at a loss. There was no blood, no pain, and Qin Weibai was surrounded by peace. Li Tianlan breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Weibai shook her head subconsciously. She seemed to still be in a daze, looking in Li Tianlan's direction with some confusion. They looked at each other for a moment. Li Tianlan's vision went black. No, it was the whole world that was abrupt. His face darkened. Darkness occupied all his consciousness, and the whole world seemed to be slowly rotating in darkness. The pain all over his body disappeared completely. Li Tianlan seemed to have lost control of his body. In the darkness, he could not feel his body, but his consciousness was still active. Darkness filled everything. There was no front or back, no left or right, no direction, and no up or down. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of a question. When humans lost their bodies and were only left with a vague consciousness, what was the meaning of front or back, left or right, up or down, fast or slow for a mass of consciousness? This question was simple and profound. When Li Tianlan began to think, his consciousness suddenly seemed to be pulled toward a certain direction. The feeling of being pulled was extremely real. But whether he was close or not, what did it mean to his consciousness? In his consciousness he saw endless light. It was gorgeous and dazzling light, occupying everything. Below the light was a dark light layer. Just a thought flashed in Li Tianlan's consciousness, and all the light had disappeared again. His consciousness was pulled into the light layer, and then fell quickly. The light was getting fainter and fainter. The darkness was getting thicker. The silent darkness seemed to absorb all the light, and his falling speed kept accelerating. Silence, long and eternal. In the endless silence and darkness, Li Tianlan's consciousness kept falling at an accelerated pace. This experience was so familiar. Absolute silence and darkness. It was very much like what he had encountered in the underground maze of the desert prison. But compared with the despair at that time, everything was more silent now. In that labyrinth, the only sounds he could hear were his own breathing and heartbeats. But here, there was no human body, only pure consciousness. All he could feel was silence, an eternal, deathly stillness that seemed to last until the end of time. Li Tianlan did not panic. Instead, his consciousness became clearer and firmer. Unable to control anything, he let his consciousness continue to fall, quietly adapting to all this in the darkness, until there was light in front of him. The light was slightly bright and warm. The moment it appeared, all the darkness retreated without any warning. Li Tianlan's consciousness was full of messy light and light bands. There seemed to be endless brilliance spreading unscrupulously in his field of vision, messy and without rules, like countless colorful scribbles. His perception of up and down began to become clear. The messy brilliance in front of him was entangled, with an indescribable sense of hierarchy. It was like heaven and earth. Li Tianlan looked at it silently. He could feel the blazing heat contained in these ribbons of light. They were like flames that could incinerate everything. They burned silently as if they would last for eternity. All of this was extremely clear and illusory, as if it was isolated. Li Tianlan did not feel the heat. All he could feel was warmth. His consciousness moved forward slowly in the light. All the light bands seemed to be gathering toward Li Tianlan, as if they wanted to merge with him. But there seemed to be a barrier between him and the light bands. The two sides were infinitely close, but they were in harmony. Li Tianlan did not know why he was here, nor did he know where he was. His consciousness kept moving forward uncontrollably in the light bands all over the sky. The light bands never changed. They seemed to be scattered everywhere in a very messy way, clear and bright, but with a fixed pattern. No matter how Li Tianlan moved forward, they did not change at all. Far. Li Tianlan vaguely noticed something. All of this was just because it was too far away. This distance seemed to be beyond his imagination, and they were far more magnificent than he looked. So no matter how he moved, their shape never changed at all. Li Tianlan never changed at all. Li Tianlan looked at the farthest light band seriously. The light band drew a long track above a piece of purity, like a scorching torrent filling the void. It was still, but at the same time, it was boiling. At the end of his sight, a touch of darkness came over silently and slowly enveloped the light band. The darkness began to spread in the farthest place. 1,000 miles, 10,000 miles, a light year, all the distance was meaningless in his consciousness. The darkness crazily extended over, bringing with it an incomparably resplendent glimmer. All the light bands were swallowed by the darkness. Li Tianlan stood in the darkness again. This darkness was no longer dead silent. Specks of light floated around him, in all directions, and in the farthest place. It was like an incomparably vast starry sky. The dark but bright starry sky seemed to have spread to the limit the moment it touched his body. So the darkness began to shrink. The endless, densely packed stars began to extinguish. The starry light suddenly shattered in pieces, disappeared, and returned to nothingness. The darkness slowly disappeared with the broken stars, as if the whole starry sky was dying out. The darkness shrank faster and faster, and the space revealed its original appearance again. The light band floated as if it was eternal. It was indescribably magnificent, but with a touch of extreme desolation and dilapidation. Li Tianlan looked at this scene in a daze. A great sadness seemed to hit his heart completely in an instant, piercing through his soul. It was indescribable unwillingness and despair. His consciousness trembled, and he instinctively chased after the starry sky that was shrinking and dying out. The darkness closed in ahead. A large piece of colorful light band was left behind by him. It was like a never-ending chase. The darkness kept shrinking, and the distance between it and Li Tianlan was not shortened at all. Li Tianlan stopped. The darkness was still shrinking, but the distance between it and him did not widen as he stopped. The light band was still floating slowly around him. Li Tianlan looked ahead in a daze. That was a spot of light. It was a spot of light that survived after the darkness closed in, and the starry sky died out. It was a fish that escaped the net. It was extremely lucky, but also extremely sad. Li Tianlan looked at this spot of light and felt a little happy. He carefully wanted to reach out his hand, but as a consciousness he could not sense his arm at all. So his whole consciousness directly hit the faintly shining spot of light in front of him. The light band all over the sky disappeared. He once again crashed into the shrinking darkness. His consciousness shrank with the darkness, shrinking toward the starting point of the spreading darkness. There was a blue light there. It was virtual, shining with countless data. It was like a table, to be exact. It was a test bench. A beautiful woman with dazzling light all over her body was standing in front of the test bench, watching the dark starry sky with the test bench as the center shrink and expand again and again. Li Tianlan's consciousness suddenly shook. His consciousness made a sound for the first time. Little by. In front of the test bench, Qin Weibai suddenly looked back. The starry sky was shrinking, like a light. Li Tianlan just wanted to say something. The darkness, the starry sky, the light band, everything completely dissipated. Li Tianlan abruptly opened his eyes and breathed rapidly. In front of him was Qin Weibai's bright eyes, which were still a little dazed. He turned his head subconsciously. Xianyuan Wushang was loosening his palm. The wounds on their bodies had completely healed. With surprise on his chubby face, he muttered to himself, The first real interaction was successful, a very perfect success. Chapter 1066. Li Tianlan didn't hear Xianyuan Wushang's voice. The moment his consciousness returned to his body, he pressed his head instinctively. He didn't know how long he had been in that absolute silence. But the moment the shrinking starry sky and the light bands all over the sky disappeared, countless voices seemed to return at the same time. Li Tianlan felt as if there were millions or even more people talking in different languages, different contents, and different tones. All the voices were mixed together, and suddenly became extremely chaotic. Blurred pictures appeared and disappeared with the voices. Li Tianlan began to feel familiar, but he couldn't see the content of the pictures at all. A lot of voices kept gathering in his ears. He seemed to be standing in the starry sky that had shrunk to the extreme, and began to expand again. A blurry Qin Weibai stood in front of him. Her silhouette was so illusory that it seemed as if it could disappear at any moment. However, her entire body was emitting a hazy and dazzling light. Qin Weibai saw a divine will rise behind her. The divine wheels surrounded her silhouette. Each divine will carried a different scene. They turned into light and continued to merge with Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai's silhouette disappeared. In the end, she turned into a magnificent and majestic crown that was also extremely exquisite and gorgeous. This picture was completely fixed in Li Tianlan's mind. All the voices disappeared completely. The surroundings were quiet again. Li Tianlan, who was pale, wiped the cold sweat on his head and let out a long breath. Xianyuan Wushang had let go of his palm. The injuries they had suffered had healed. Li Tianlan froze for a moment and fell silent. Xianyuan Wushang took a step back and looked at Li Tianlan seriously. "Big brother, do you understand?" Just now. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. "That's malice," Xianyuan Wushang said slowly. "It's just that the situation here is special. Big brother, you have a second heart now, and sister-in-law is here. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare to say anything. It's okay if you don't hear it. If you really hear it, we won't even know how we die." Li Tianlan was silent and subconsciously looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai's face was slightly red. She shook her head slightly, and then came to her senses. She said confusedly, "What happened just now? I feel a little dizzy." Li Tianlan was speechless for a moment. It was impossible for him to forget the injuries he and Xianyuan Wushang had suffered when they bore the malice of the world. If Xianyuan Wushang had not been there, he would have been at risk of dying from such injuries. But Qin Weibai only felt a little dizzy. Li Tianlan looked at Xianyuan Wushang and asked, "What's going on?" "It's probably because sister-in-law is special." Xianyuan Wushang smiled meaningfully. The malice of the world was indeed not something that Qin Weibai needed to worry about. To some extent, this person was equivalent to the physical projection of the Qin Weibai in the European continent. Xianyuan Wushang could never forget what he had experienced in the depths of Qin Weibai's consciousness. The scene, which was similar to the eternal furnace, was between reality and illusion, and was not affected by the world. Eternal furnace. To the space-time corridor, it was a forbidden zone for the human race. At the same time, it was also a paradise for the human race. The most crucial transformation of every peak energy source of the human race was carried out in the eternal furnace. How did the human emperor of the human emperor palace and the god of war of the god of war's realm manage to leave the corridor of time and space? It was even allowed to cut off half of the miracle city? At that time, the two could not be regarded as masters among the top experts of the same level. Even now, Xianyuan Wushang could be sure that the two would not be a match for his father even if they joined forces. They could leave the space-time corridor because they had gained a lot in the eternal furnace. These gains had turned into potential, and even gave them the hope of catching up with his father. Qin Weibai's consciousness space was still far from the real eternal furnace, but it already had some characteristics. She could pass through the current miracle city in that space and reach the other half of the miracle city. This was enough to explain the problem. And the Qin Weibai in front of him, as the physical projection of that person, could not be affected by any malice. She just could not resist it. The specific situation was that when Li Tianlan received some information that might cause the malice of the world, Qin Weibai could not hear the content. If she wanted to really understand those things, she could only rely on the real interaction with Li Tianlan again and again. Li Tianlan was thinking quietly. After all, he was different from Wang Shengxiao. At least for many things, he would not ask why or how he did it. Those things that seemed incomprehensible were easy to make people curious. But Li Tianlan knew that he could not figure it out in a short time. He was more concerned about his own strength. If you don't understand what's going on, then you don't understand. He only cared about what he and the people around him could do. Apart from that, he did not even care about Xianyuan Wushang's background. What can you do? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Xianyuan Wushang was stunned. But obviously he was familiar with Li Tianlan's straightforwardness, so he said directly, I'm a doctor. From now on, as long as I'm in Emperor Dong's palace, you don't have to worry about most of your injuries, big brother. My healing ability can even cover a large battlefield. So not only you, but also the soldiers of Emperor Dong's palace don't have to worry about getting hurt. Li Tianlan immediately thought of the incredible battle-loss ratio of East Island. He nodded and showed a trace of a smile. He looked at Xing Tian and asked, what about him? His ability is a bit abstract. It's hard for me to give an example. He's a calligrapher. But big brother, you can use him as an invincible realm expert. Although he's not at the peak of the invincible realm, he's close. Xianyuan Wushang glanced at Xing Tian, who was still lying on the ground in a daze. Li Tianlan nodded and seemed to be thinking about something. What else can you tell me? He asked slowly. Xianyuan Wushang frowned, and his face gradually became cautious. More things can only wait until you break through again. Only then can we work together to withstand stronger malice. Before that, the only thing I can say is that the current Emperor Dong's palace is not enough. It needs to expand. Big brother, you need a dynasty, a real dynasty. After a pause, Xianyuan Wushang said slowly, for now this is even the most important thing. It's overwhelming. Li Tianlan took a deep look at him. In fact, the situation is very clear. Xianyuan Wushang continued. The Wang family of Beihai is very likely to cooperate with Lin Shi, and Jiang Shangyu will also cooperate with Li Guangtu. This is the current situation in the Dark World, and it will also be the main opponent of Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan nodded and suddenly said, the family behind Lin Shi and the family behind you are enemies? A strange look flashed in Xianyuan Wushang's eyes. Enemies? He pondered for a moment and finally shook his head. Not really. Of course, we can't be considered friends either. In fact, in most situations, we basically don't have any interaction with them. But if both sides need it, we will support each other. That's about it. In fact, when some crises rise to a certain level, the so-called grievances, hatred, and blood feuds are not important. We can help each other, not because we are friends. The biggest reason is that we are human beings. We are human beings. That's all. I don't understand. Li Tianlan said blandly. Xianyuan Wushang smiled bitterly but didn't say much. Li Tianlan seemed to understand something and nodded. There was a sudden knock on the door. It was extremely urgent. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. Come in. The door was violently pushed open. Military counselor rushed in almost at full speed. He looked at Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai with a strange look in his eyes. What's going on? Li Tianlan asked with a frown. What's going on? What's going on? Military counselor murmured to himself, and then smiled with relief. What's going on? I want to know too. Li Tianlan was a little confused. The plane is ready, and so is the team. I can make other arrangements on the plane. Military counselor took a deep breath and said with a strange look in his eyes. In fact, I was already outside the door 10 minutes ago. Yes, 10 minutes ago. But I looked outside the door for a full 10 minutes, but I couldn't find the door of the small reception room. The whole small reception room seemed to suddenly disappear. Just now, when I turned around, the door of the small reception room suddenly appeared in front of me. Military counselor looked serious. Who can tell me what's going on? Chapter 1067. After a chaotic and bloody night, the sun rose, and the sky was clear. The inside of East Island began to become extremely calm, and at the same time, extremely chaotic. What was calm was the situation. What was chaotic was people's hearts. In the huge conference room, the extremely noisy voices had lasted for several hours. The discussion became a discussion. The discussion became a dispute, and the dispute became a quarrel. Everyone seemed to be speaking at the same time, and countless voices mixed together, and became noise. No one could hear what others were saying. Everyone was scrambling to express their own opinions. Worried, radical, decadent, and self-deprecating. The conference room was filled with smoke, and the thick smoke filled every corner of the conference room, like a thin cloud. The crowd, whose eyes were red because of choking, showed undisguised anxiety, and sweat flowed down their faces. Some people took off their coats, and some people tore their ties. The roaring never stopped. Everyone was trying to say something, and there was a touch of anger and fear deep in everyone's eyes that couldn't be concealed. I just received the news that Wooden Island sect was destroyed 2 hours ago. It was Li Beitian who did it. One person, only him. He destroyed Wooden Island sect alone. A rough voice suddenly rang out in the midst of all the noise. The atmosphere in the whole conference room suddenly quieted down for a moment. Wooden Island sect. Everyone present was familiar with this sect. Although East Island was small, it had never been weak in martial arts. The development of martial arts was extremely prosperous, and all kinds of sects could be found all over the territory. A few years ago, East Island had 3 invincible realm experts. The 3 heads of Wuji Palace, Liuhua Palace, and Jifeng Sword Raining School were also known as the 3 grandmasters of East Island. Even some superpowers couldn't get 3 invincible realm experts. If you only looked at the number of people and not the specific strength, a few years ago, the number of invincible realm experts in Zhongzhou State was only 1 more than that in East Island. Perhaps because of the system of East Island, they had always attached great importance to the development of martial arts, and the right to speak in the dark world. In addition to the 3 superpowers, various martial arts sects would also get different resources and support. Among them, Wooden Island sect was a relatively powerful martial arts sect. Although there had never been an invincible realm expert since its establishment, the leader of each generation was at least at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. In addition to the leader, Wooden Island sect could always maintain a lineup of about 3 to 5 thunder-shocking realm experts. With such strength, except for forces such as Jifeng Sword Raining School, Wuji Palace and Liuhua Palace, it could be regarded as a first-class martial arts sect in the whole East Island. And the most special thing was the location of Wooden Island sect. This was the closest martial arts sect to Heaven Capital. The elimination of Wooden Island sect meant that the power of Emperor Dong's palace had officially spread to the vicinity of Heaven Capital. Is there only Liuhua Palace? A middle-aged man in East Island, who was already a little bald, muttered to himself. Liuhua Palace. My Shiranui, that bitch. She's a bitch. What can she do? What else can she do? The roar came from the conference room again. Everyone's face was full of excitement. Liuhua Palace used to be the oldest martial arts force in East Island, and it was also the martial arts force that declined the fastest in recent years. But to some extent, they could also be regarded as the most prosperous martial arts force in East Island in recent years. The palace master of Liuhua Palace, Shinichi Miyamoto of the Invincible Realm, died in the hands of tribulation in the final battle of Heaven Capital. They who had lost the Invincible Realm did not become weak to some extent, because they had a very smart young palace master, Mai Shiranui, who was known as the young heavenly son of East Island. Her strength might be nothing at the beginning, but she was the first person to turn to the purgatory of Heaven Capital after it appeared in East Island. The purgatory of Heaven Capital took root in East Island. First, it supported Mai Shiranui to the position of the palace master of Liuhua Palace. Then it began to devour the interests of Liuhua Palace. And Mai Shiranui began to integrate the large and small sects in East Island with the support of the purgatory of Heaven Capital. Li Kuangtu had never returned to East Island since the chaos in Snow Country. The power of the purgatory of Heaven Capital in East Island was constantly weakening. In the process, Liuhua Palace was naturally suppressed. But Mai Shiranui was no longer the same Mai Shiranui. Facing the suppression from all sides, She gave up a lot of interests and weakened the connection with the Purgatory of Heaven capital. During the 2 years when the Purgatory of Heaven capital left East Island, my Shiranui compromised a lot, but the basic structure of Liuhua Palace was preserved. The connection between her and the Purgatory of Heaven capital was almost non-existent. Now the whole Heaven capital seemed to have become the foundation of Liuhua Palace. Mai Shiranui was indeed not a simple woman, but now she was only close to the strength of the half-step invincible realm. How could she defend Heaven capital in the face of the aggressive Emperor Dong's palace? A cruel reality had been put in front of everyone. In one night, Situt Songyue and Saint swept the headquarters of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace, but other experts of Emperor Dong's palace were not idle either. Lin Yuxian, Li Beitian, Bai Yuming, Du Hanin, Su Chu. These young people who had begun to grow up and were famous in the dark world now all entered East Island. 2 invincible realm experts fought against the 2 biggest martial arts forces in East Island. And these young experts did not stop for a moment, and swept all the famous martial arts schools in East Island. They made full use of the time of one night. With the destruction of Wooden Island School by Li Beitian, the only martial arts school that could be said to have a deep foundation in the whole East Island was Liuhua Palace in Heaven capital. Attack! We must attack. Teach Emperor Dong's palace a lesson, and let them know that this is East Island. Order Mai Shiranui to block Emperor Dong's palace. Mai Shiranui has long betrayed East Island. There are many other schools. Are we going to use the army? Everyone roared at the same time. No one listened to what others said at all. They just raised their voices as much as possible to let others hear their opinions. There were not many people in the conference room. There were less than 20 people speaking at this time. But in the noise, the whole conference room was as chaotic as a vegetable market. The door of the conference room was slowly pushed open in the noise. A short middle-aged man faced the smoke coming at his face. He held his breath for a moment, and then coughed violently. The smoke drifted along the open door of the conference room along with the noise. The middle-aged man coughed for a while, but no one noticed his arrival. He gasped and his face was red. When he finally came to his senses and saw the messy scene in front of him, his red face suddenly turned livid. Bastard! Be quiet. Be quiet, all of you. The middle-aged man was short, but his voice was extremely loud. His voice kept echoing in the conference room, suppressing all the noise. Everyone in the conference room focused on the middle-aged man. All the noise suddenly disappeared. In the sudden silence, a man in a military uniform stood up and slightly bowed to the middle-aged man. Your Excellency, Prince Jing. Everyone stood up and slightly bowed respectfully. In East Island, the special warfare system had always been the exclusive domain of the royal family. Even the cabinet couldn't intervene. The royal family had absolute leadership over the special warfare system, which was also the greatest power in their hands. The 20 people in the conference room could be said to be the real high level of the special warfare system of East Island. They were all loyal to the royal family. Although Prince Jing was not the crown prince, he was also one of the most valued people by the royal family. He was also the most popular person for the crown prince. No matter how angry the high-level people were, they couldn't help but change their attitude in front of him. How long do you want to quarrel? The livid Prince Jing didn't sit down. He stood there and looked at the people in the conference room with a livid face. The middle-aged soldier who stood up first hesitated and said in a low voice, Your Excellency, we are still discussing countermeasures. Prince Jing's body flashed. In the clear sound, he slapped the middle-aged soldier hard in the face. The next second he suddenly roared, Trash! You are all trash! What countermeasures are you discussing? The martial arts sects of East Island are almost all killed, and you are still discussing countermeasures here? When you have a solution, let alone martial arts sects, will there still be East Island in this world? Say something. The middle-aged soldier's body was slapped and turned 360 degrees on the spot. He covered his face tightly and said in a deep voice, We still have Liuhua Palace. We can order Mai Shiranui to temporarily stall Emperor Dong's palace, and then we... Smack! Prince slapped him on the left side of his face again. As his body was spinning, Prince's extremely cold voice sounded. There is no more. My Shiranui betrayed East Island. Now Situtsang and Saint have arrived in Heaven Capital, and are guests at the headquarters of Liuhua Palace. My Shiranui invited them personally. From now on, there is no Liuhua Palace in East Island no more. We still have other sects. Another person stood up. Prince's cold eyes glanced over, and found that it was the intelligence minister of the Special Warfare System of East Island. Other sects? Prince's voice suddenly calmed down. Maybe because of despair, his heart was dead. Other sects such as? Can you tell me one that I've heard of? The intelligence minister paused slightly. The sects that Prince Jing had heard of had been completely wiped out last night. There were many martial arts sects in East Island now. But compared with those famous ones, the rest of the martial arts sects were like cats and dogs. At least in the eyes of Emperor Dong's palace, they didn't care about those sects at all. Your Highness, although the other martial arts schools are not famous, they are also a force. If they can be integrated, they can play a great role. Together with our soldiers and weapons, we can fight with Emperor Dong's palace, said Yi Futian. The intelligence minister gritted his teeth and said. The prince moved his body as if he wanted to slap the Minister of Intelligence, but he had already raised his hand. In the end, he let out a long sigh and fell into the chair closest to him. What's the use of integrating those sects? How many thunder-shocking realm experts can there be in all of them? Can there be more than 5? You still talk about the army and weapons. Weapons? This is East Island. Do you dare to use those weapons that threaten Emperor Dong's palace? Who dares to use them? Soldiers. The cabinet is more lively than here now. Who can mobilize soldiers except those bastards? The intelligence minister wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and didn't say anything. I need the specific situation of the special warfare system. Prince Jing was silent for a while and suddenly said. The intelligence minister opened his mouth, hesitated, and finally smiled bitterly. Your Excellency Prince, there is no special warfare system anymore. Emperor Dong's palace has almost wiped out all our high-end martial arts forces. I just did the statistics. At present, there are still 42 martial arts sects in East Island. Among them, there are 2 superiors at the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm, and 5 superiors of the Thunder-Shocking Realm. This is the high-end force in the special warfare system today. While he was talking, his phone suddenly vibrated. The intelligence minister took out his phone and looked down at it. His face suddenly became even more gloomy. I take back what I just said. The 2 superiors at the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm from the Ju-Dao Integration Sect and the Flowing Water Sword Sect were killed half an hour ago. The conference room became more and more silent. Prince Jing slumped in the chair numbly and didn't say a word for a long time. Attack. We immediately asked the cabinet to attack. Kill them. Another high-level official suddenly stood up and roared. Do you think the cabinet is better off than us? Prince Jing said numbly. We lost 3 fleets overnight, all of which fell into the hands of the Border Control Corps of Zhongzhou State, including the giant whale. All the weapon systems of East Island got out of control not long ago, but all the operation permissions are in chaos. They are completely rewritten into a mess. The most important thing for the cabinet now is to mobilize the army to fill the gaps of the 3 fleets. How can they have the energy to deal with Emperor Dong's palace? There was a dead silence. In the conference room, Prince Jing sighed. The most important power of the imperial family was concentrated in the special warfare system. But overnight, the entire special warfare system was almost completely destroyed by Emperor Dong's palace. All the power of the imperial family was completely evaporated, and there was no hope of a comeback in a short time. Everyone present knew what this meant. The influence of the imperial family was greatly weakened. Even these people here had become commanders without an army. East Island would also lose the right to speak in the dark world. Their every move might even appear in the sight of Emperor Dong's palace in the future. East Island still belonged to the people of East Island, but from today on, it was also the East Island of Emperor Dong's palace. Maybe we can talk to Li Tianlan? The Minister of Intelligence said hesitantly. Are you crazy? Li Tianlan is different from Li Guangtu. He's from Zhongzhou State. From Zhongzhou State? Are you sure? The Minister of Intelligence sneered. Emperor Dong's palace is in Tiannan now. Enough. Prince Jing said with a gloomy face. Shut up, all of you. Father has decided to visit His Majesty Li Tianlan in Tiannan in 3 days. The conference room suddenly became dead silent. Everyone looked at Prince Jing in a daze, and their faces were full of disbelief. The corner of Prince Jing's mouth twitched, and his heart was full of bitterness. Are we going to cooperate with Emperor Dong's palace? The middle-aged soldier who was slapped twice looked angry and unwilling. Cooperation. The prince smiled bitterly. To be exact, this was just the current unilateral wish of the imperial family. In this matter, the imperial family was unprecedentedly calm, so they were very clear about the current situation. It was completely unstoppable for Emperor Dong's palace to enter East Island and occupy the dark world of East Island. Yagyu Kurosumi and Tianhai Wuji died in Beihai at the same time. The 2 martial arts sects were swept away, and all the powerful martial arts forces were also swept away. The entire East Island was in an unprecedentedly weak state in terms of experts. It would take at least a generation, or even longer, for martial arts of East Island to recover. In this final battle in Beihai, the military also suffered heavy losses. The most important thing was that until now, East Island still didn't know what happened last night. What they found out was that all the weapon control systems were stuffed with a lot of garbled codes. Communication. As for communication, until now no one could even say for sure what went wrong with the communication last night. Because in everyone's view, the communication last night was very normal. The general headquarters could contact any department, any fleet, and even any small fleet unit. There was no problem with the reports, commands, and feedback of each department. What they saw was also very real. There was no abnormality in the communication between the various departments, but it silently covered up all the truth. No one knew what was going on. Without knowing this, East Island didn't dare to do anything. If such a method were to be used again, no one dared to imagine what the consequences would be. So at this stage, the entire East Island would be in a state of careful defense, and the cabinet didn't dare to support the royals. The right to speak in the dark world? No matter how reluctant they were, they had to give it up now. In the following time, Emperor Dong's palace could be said to be almost unbridled in East Island, and they didn't need to worry about anything. The royals couldn't stop all this. So the only thing they could think of was cooperation. This was their unilateral wish. In fact, before Prince Jing came, he had received the notice from the royals. His father contacted Emperor Dong's palace in person and successfully communicated with Li Tianlan. He sincerely invited His Majesty Emperor Dong to East Island for a talk. But the result wasn't good, because from beginning to end, Li Tianlan only said 4 words. I don't have time. The phone was hung up directly. The royals didn't dare to call again. The purpose of Prince Jing's visit now was to keep an eye on the senior members of the special warfare system of East Island, so that these idiots wouldn't do anything radical. To be exact, he didn't want them to figure out how to deal with Emperor Dong's palace. Now it's time for us to show our sincerity, Prince Jing said blandly. He didn't say that Emperor Dong's palace didn't care about the so-called cooperation, and no one knew whether the cooperation would succeed or not. But since the other party had shown their attitude, the royals had to show their sincerity unless they fell out with them. As for falling out with them, how could they do that now? Everyone's face twisted when they heard this. Sincerity. How could they show their sincerity when the other party had already fought in front of them? Should they close their eyes and turn a blind eye? A bad-tempered special warfare general shouted this directly. Turn a blind eye? Prince Jing sneered. If you just turn a blind eye, what kind of sincerity is that? The royals hope that everyone here can show their sincerity. They hope that you can send a few representatives to cooperate with Emperor Dong's palace. I know you're not willing. In fact, no one is willing. But before we have the power to regain the right to speak in the dark world, I don't want anyone to do anything stupid. Do you understand what I mean? Silence. It was almost dead silent. In the smoke-filled conference room, everyone's faces were flushed with anger and unwillingness. Most people's faces were even turning purple from holding back their anger. But no one spoke. It wasn't that they didn't want to say it. They just didn't know what to say. That's all I want to say. Prince Jing said blandly, "We need to send 2 representatives to cooperate with Emperor Dong's palace. Everyone who wants to go." Chapter 1068. It was snowing heavily in Heaven Capital. It had been snowing for nearly a day and a night. Snowflakes covered the whole city, dancing messily in the sky. The surroundings of Liuhua Palace were snowy and quiet. No one swept the snow, and there were no pedestrians. The snowflakes lay quietly on the ground, and there seemed to be no signs of damage. Liuhua Palace was the tallest building in Heaven Capital, located in the center of Heaven Capital. It used to be a hotel, but after several years of renovation, it had become a multi-purpose building that integrated office, accommodation, training, catering, entertainment, and medical care. The famous Liuhua Palace was on the roof of this building, and it was about the size of a small villa. With the building of Liuhua Palace as the center, it was surrounded by a strictly planned land of about 1,000 acres. It was completely arranged according to the garden style of Zhongzhou State, with pavilions, terraces, small bridges, and flowing water. It was beautiful and quiet. Snowflakes fell layer by layer, and in the white, this huge garden had a kind of dreamy beauty. Outside the garden was the streets of Heaven Capital. Given the size and population of East Island, there were no quiet streets in East Island at all. There was an endless stream of people and cars on the streets. The snowflakes on the streets had melted, and the snowy ground was a mess after being stepped on. The melted water flowed on the streets, and then evaporated in the continuous traffic. Quiet, beautiful, and dreamy. It was noisy, chaotic, and noisy. Everything inside and outside the garden, it was like 2 distinct worlds. "This place is really good." Li Beitian sighed softly as he stood on the observation deck of the Flowing Fire Palace. Standing in this place where he could overlook the entire city, looking at the quiet gardens and the bustling streets, it was very easy for people to have some inexplicable thoughts. He shook his head slightly, turned to look at the young woman standing next to him, and said with a smile, "I heard that this was built with the money of the royal family a few years ago?" The woman nodded and said softly, without any expression on her face. She was not tall, about 1.6 meters, but her whole body was like a porcelain doll, delicate like jade. Her aura was a little cold, but her face was extremely enchanting. Even though she was just standing there quietly, she had a kind of charm that could steal one's soul and make it hard for one to extricate themselves. But she was very reserved, and she spoke softly, with a very comfortable, reserved and delicate air. "This place is very suitable to be your Majesty's temporary imperial residence." "Maybe." Li Beitian looked at her and nodded with a smile. "But His Majesty doesn't like people who think too much." The woman bit her lips and didn't say anything. "My Shiranui, the current palace master of Liuhua Palace." She used to be the young heavenly son of East Island, the young palace master of Liuhua Palace, and the student of Shinichi Miyamoto, the supreme master of East Island. Countless people in East Island regarded her as the future star of the dark world, and no one would doubt her future. At that time, she was almost a goddess in the eyes of the young generation in East Island. But with the fall of Shinichi Miyamoto, the rise of the purgatory of Heaven Capital, the chaos in Snow Country, and now, my Shiranui's image in East Island had been constantly changing for more than 5 years. In the past few years, everything she did was almost synonymous with scheming. Countless people were secretly cursing her with countless vicious insults. How much praise she had once received was how much cursing she was receiving now. She was the first to turn to the purgatory of Heaven Capital, which made the development of the purgatory of Heaven Capital in East Island almost without any obstacles. The influence of the purgatory of Heaven Capital easily suppressed Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School. A fox flaunting the tiger's might and a dog relying on its master's power. That was what everyone thought. My Shiranui did so. With the power of the purgatory of Heaven Capital, she became an extremely sharp knife in the hands of the purgatory of Heaven Capital. Institutions were brought under the management of the purgatory of Heaven Capital one after another. All kinds of martial arts schools were completely broken up and joined the purgatory of Heaven Capital. The results of various laboratories made the purgatory of Heaven Capital develop rapidly. private consortia began to provide help to the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Mai Shiranui was too familiar with East Island and everything about the East Island Special Exhibition Institution, so she didn't hide anything. With the power given to her by the Purgatory of Heaven capital, she was completely desperate to express her loyalty to Li Kuangtu. Countless people hated him to the bone. In her series of almost crazy actions, the Purgatory of Heaven capital officially took root in East Island. Liuhua Palace, which had lost Shinichi Miyamoto, didn't fall in her hands. Instead, it became stronger than before because of the existence of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. After the chaos in Snow Country, Li Kuangtu began to take root in Tiannan. Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School began to suppress everything of the Purgatory of Heaven capital in East Island without hesitation, and at the same time began to target Mai Shiranui. Mai Shiranui, who was extremely loyal to the Purgatory of Heaven capital before, also did not hesitate. She began to use the Purgatory of Heaven capital as a shield again and again. On the surface, she still maintained her loyalty to the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but in fact she gave up everything of the Purgatory of Heaven capital again and again in the suppression. Not only did she give up, but the sacrifice pawns of the Purgatory of Heaven capital had been used as bargaining chips for external compromise. It sounded simple, but in fact it wasn't, because she had used this method many times, but the Purgatory of Heaven capital had never suspected her from beginning to end, until half a year ago, when the second superior of the invincible realm of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, Daybreak, returned to Tiannan from East Island. Mai Shiranui, who thought she was well prepared, finally revealed her true thoughts. In the constant suppression, the remaining power of the Purgatory of Heaven capital in East Island was almost completely cleared out by her. And now, the manor that originally belonged to the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was directly occupied by Mai Shiranui. The Wangtian Pavilion of the Purgatory of Heaven capital became the current Liuhua Palace. She gave up all the interests outside Heaven capital in exchange for the temporary concessions of Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School. If everything went well, then Mai Shiranui would turn Heaven capital into Liuhua City. When she broke through again and became a real superior of the half-step invincible realm, the entire Liuhua Palace would be reborn with her. However, an accident happened. Mai Shiranui had known about the final battle in Beihai for a long time. The reason why she could stabilize her position so quickly after cutting off the connection with the Purgatory of Heaven capital was that Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School were busy preparing for the final battle in Beihai. To put it bluntly, it was because of the final battle in Beihai that Mai Shiranui made up her mind to cut ties with the Purgatory of Heaven capital. She knew very well what East Island wanted. So in her opinion, whether the final battle in Beihai won or not, there would be a long period of chaos between Beihai and East Island. Neither Jifeng Sword Training School nor Wuji Palace could care about Liuhua Palace. This period of time couldn't be too short, so it became a chance for Liuhua Palace to rise. Her idea couldn't be said to be wrong, because that was what everyone thought. But the result of the final battle stunned the whole world. Chaos. No. After the final battle in Beihai, the whole East Island almost lost the ability to resist. The other two sects that had been suppressing Liuhua Palace, including their invincible realm grandmasters, all died. When the Purgatory of Heaven capital was still silent, the shadow of Emperor Dong's palace had directly shrouded over and covered the dark world of the whole East Island. Right now in East Island, Saint and Situt Songyue were really invincible. They could do anything they wanted. Not to mention that behind Situt Songyue and Saint was Donghuang Li Tianlan, who was invincible in the world. There was no chance. The headquarters of Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace were destroyed. All the famous martial arts sects in East Island were wiped out by Emperor Dong's palace one by one. In just one night, the enemy had already approached Tiandu City. Mai Shiranui had thought of resisting, but it was just a thought. She knew very well. There was no chance at all. At the beginning, the Purgatory of Heaven capital cooperated with the royal family to gain a foothold in East Island. Anyway, at that time, after reaching an agreement with the royal family, the Purgatory of Heaven capital appeared in front of the people of East Island as a guardian. But now, Emperor Dong's palace. There was no cooperation, no agreement. The vanguard of Emperor Dong's palace went straight to East Island, completely like a conqueror. They didn't need to have any scruples. The destroyed martial arts sects were clearly expressing the will of Emperor Dong's palace to Mai Shiranui. She didn't have much choice. Surrender. Or die. So the Wooden Island School near Heaven Capital was destroyed by Li Beitian alone. When Li Beitian entered Heaven Capital alone, Mai Shiranui gave up all the defense of Heaven Capital, invited Li Beitian to Liuhua Palace in person, and announced her surrender to Emperor Dong's palace to the whole East Island. Mai Shiranui looked at the snow outside the window, and was silent for a long time. Then she said softly, "Don't worry, Your Excellency. Please tell His Majesty Emperor Dong that Liuhua Palace has no choice now." "Really?" Li Beitian asked. Mai Shiranui smiled bitterly. "You are different from the purgatory of Heaven Capital." Li Beitian was stunned and asked casually. "Of course we are stronger than the purgatory of Heaven Capital. In fact, in our eyes, the purgatory of Heaven Capital is already a part of Emperor Dong's palace." This might be difficult for some old people of the Li family, especially those who were loyal to Li Kuangtu, to accept, but it was true. The current Emperor Dong's palace had surpassed the purgatory of Heaven Capital in all aspects. Even the purgatory of Heaven Capital in its strongest period couldn't compare with it. In terms of experts, there was no need to doubt Li Tianlan's strength. In the absence of Wang Tianzong, Li Tianlan was now the well-deserved number one. Below Li Tianlan, there were two invincible realm experts, Saint and Situt Songyue. Situt Songyue's potential might be a little poor, but Saint had been making progress. His final destination was hard to say, but it was not difficult for him to reach the peak of the invincible realm. Li Beitian had now found the way to the invincible realm. The great void sword intent of Mount Shu became stronger in the later stage of martial arts. Li Beitian's path became clearer and clearer. He was confident that he would not be worse than his eldest senior brother Saint in the future. Lin Yuxian had been cultivated as the heir of the Lin clan before. His achievements would not be weaker than Lin Fengting's. Experts with potential. Emperor Dong's palace was now stronger than the purgatory of Heaven Capital. In terms of influence, Emperor Dong's palace was rising like the sun in the sky, while the purgatory of Heaven Capital gave people the feeling that the sun was setting in the west. In terms of wealth, the purgatory of Heaven Capital could not compare at all. The new group in Zhongzhou State had now taken shape and gathered a considerable part of its strength. Xianyuan City in Tiannan had taken root. With Li Tianlan's return, the ownership of Tiannan would become obvious. The purgatory of Heaven Capital could not compare with this kind of foundation and power. Emperor Dong's palace had only risen for a short time, but in terms of real strength, it had even surpassed the Li family's peak. After all, at the peak of the Li family, the Wang family of Beihai was also extremely strong. That's not all I want to say. Mai Shiranui shook her head gently. The biggest difference between you and the purgatory of Heaven Capital is the standpoint. Li Beitian was silent. After a while he nodded and said, "I see." Mai Shiranui did not speak. The standpoint was the biggest difference. The appearance of the purgatory of Heaven Capital might be sudden, but the royals reacted quickly. They invited Li Kuangtu, and Li Kuangtu did not refuse the olive branch extended by the royals, and agreed to cooperate with them. In that state, the purgatory of Heaven Capital might not be recognized by Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Reigning School, but it was recognized by the royals. Mai Shiranui could turn to the purgatory of Heaven Capital for the first time, but she actually did not betray anything. Even strictly speaking, she only betrayed the idea of Liuhua Palace, Jifeng Sword Reigning School, and Wuji Palace competing with each other, but advancing and retreating together. Jifeng Sword Reigning School and Wuji Palace would exclude her, but if she did not do so, Jifeng Sword Reigning School and Wuji Palace would annex Liuhua Palace at once. She turned to the purgatory of Heaven Capital, and could always be said to be a member of the special warfare system of East Island, and Emperor Dong's palace. This time, they came to East Island with the attitude of conquerors. In the current situation of East Island, there was no room to fight back. The royals might still have some hope, but Mai Shiranui knew very well that Emperor Dong's palace could not cooperate with the royals. With Li Tianlan's overbearingness, he just wanted Emperor Dong's palace to take root in East Island without being recognized by the royals. All the martial arts schools that disagreed had now been destroyed. Mai Shiranui chose to surrender. This also meant that she completely betrayed East Island. She had no choice. When Li Beitian came to Heaven Capital alone, and was invited to Liuhua Palace by Mai Shiranui in person, she had no choice. In this case, reorganize Liuhua Palace. Li Beitian looked down at his watch. In about 5 hours, First Senior Brother and Her Highness Hidden God will come to Heaven Capital, and then we will take over everything here. He looked at Mai Shiranui's enchanting but extremely cold face. What do you want for the future? According to your attitude, Emperor Dong's palace will meet some of your conditions and let you stay here. It's not entirely impossible. I only have one request. Mai Shiranui bit her lip. She said softly. Say it. Li Beitian said lightly. A touch of very moving bright red climbed onto Mai Shiranui's cold face. Her eyes flickered slightly and she whispered. I want to be His Majesty Li Tianlan's woman. I want to go back to Tiannan with you. Silence. Li Beitian was quiet for 2 seconds, then he blinked and said, What? I want to be His Majesty Li Tianlan's woman. Mai Shiranui raised her head, and her eyes were extremely moving. At this moment, she finally remembered her first encounter with Li Tianlan in Heaven Capital a few years ago. Mai Shiranui was in a trance. At that time, she never thought that the injured peer standing in front of her at that time would now become Emperor Dong, who shocked the dark world. Do you think it's possible? Li Beitian looked at Mai Shiranui incredulously. She wanted to be the hostess of Emperor Dong's palace with only Liuhua Palace? Even if she was one of the hostesses, this woman was simply crazy. Am I not beautiful enough? Mai Shiranui tilted her head. Li Beitian was stunned. In all fairness, Mai Shiranui was indeed a stunning beauty. But to be Li Tianlan's woman, everyone would ignore Mai Shiranui's beauty. No matter how beautiful you are, can you compare to Qin Weibai? Li Beitian felt that Mai Shiranui was really crazy. It's not up to you to decide. Mai Shiranui whispered. You can contact His Majesty East Emperor now. This is my only request. Liuhua Palace is not enough, and I am not beautiful enough. What if I add you? What do you mean? Li Beitian frowned. If he doesn't agree, Mai Shiranui lowered her head. She whispered, I'll kill you, then turn to the royal family, hide my identity, and wait for an opportunity. The corner of Li Beitian's mouth twitched. Only then did he understand that it was not from the moment he stepped here that Mai Shiranui had no choice. It was from the moment he walked out of here that Mai Shiranui really had no choice. When he opened his eyes again, the world was shaking slightly, and what seemed to be the sound of the waves was constantly rippling in his ears. The narrow space in front of him was constantly shaking, and the dim light refracted chaotic shadows in his sight. Where am I? Li Guangtu frowned slightly and slowly sat up. He was covered with a dirty quilt with a large oil stain on it. The shaking of the world was not an illusion, and the slight ups and downs became obvious and clear. Li Tianlan was silent for a while before he finally confirmed that he was on a boat. There was a very small window in the room. Li Tianlan stood up and looked out of the window. Outside the window was a calm sea, and there seemed to be an island in the farthest distance. Am I going to dock? Li Guangtu thought silently and finally remembered what happened before he passed out. Before he passed out, he was still in the hotel in Shenzhou. With the further martial law in Shenzhou, he and Jiang Shangyu couldn't even move their positions. They could only stay in the room and wait for Jiang Shangyu to arrange a rescue. After serious internal injuries and excessive physical exhaustion, Li Guangtu lay on the bed and fell asleep. When he opened his eyes again, he was already on the boat. No matter where he was, at least he was away from Shenzhou and Beihai. That was to say, safe? Li Guangtu's heart relaxed for a moment, and then he frowned again. He knew his physical condition very well. His injury was indeed very serious. Otherwise he would not have chosen to rest at that time. Under limited conditions, sleep was the best way for the body to recover. But in his state at that time, sleep was sleep, and it was impossible for him to pass out. Unless Jiang Shangyu did something to him while he was asleep. Li Guangtu's expression was cold. He took a slow breath and opened the dilapidated and narrow door in front of him. A small cruise ship that looked extremely shabby was floating on the sea. On the deck of the second floor, Jiang Shangyu was sitting there and looking at the sea in a daze. Seeing Li Guangtu open the door, he smiled and waved. "How was your rest?" "That's not rest." Li Guangtu's voice was cold. "Did you plot against me? I just let you sleep a little longer. Don't get me wrong. Your injury is very serious. It's good for you to sleep a little longer. If I really wanted to plot against you, I should have left you in the hotel and left by myself, but what good would that do me?" Jiang Shangyu shook his head and pushed a box of East Island cigarettes in front of him to Li Guangtu. Li Guangtu was silent for a while. He did know his body very well. But even if he was an immortal, he didn't know how much good it would do for his body if he slept a little longer. He silently took out a cigarette, lit it with a lighter, took a deep breath and said slowly, "How did we leave Beihai?" "When you were asleep, the people I arranged in Beihai found a chance and took us out. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't that difficult," Jiang Shangyu said with a smile. "Where is he?" Li Guangtu looked at Jiang Shangyu and suddenly asked. Jiang Shangyu's movement paused slightly, and he said calmly, "Of course he stayed in Beihai. He still has some tasks in Beihai. He didn't expose anything in this action, so he naturally has to continue to lurk." Li Guangtu nodded and said faintly, "Oh." He didn't believe Jiang Shangyu's nonsense about letting him sleep a little longer. Obviously, there was a reason why Jiang Shangyu made him fall into a coma. Either he didn't want him to see something, or he didn't want him to see someone. Now it seemed that the only explanation was that Jiang Shangyu didn't want him to see who he arranged in Beihai. He frowned slightly and smoked. "Where are we now?" "Just approaching East Island." Jiang Shangyu pointed to the distance. "About 40 nautical miles away, there will be an island. Nominally, it's the territory of East Island. In fact, I bought it a few years ago. It's my property. We need to discuss something there." "We?" Li Guangtu raised his eyebrows. Jiang Shangyu said, "Yes, there's another distinguished guest." After a pause he smiled and said, "It wasn't easy to invite him to the island. However, he's just a pitiful person. Everyone is the same, so there's a basis for cooperation. Although I don't know what the outcome will be today, with the current situation, we can still negotiate." Li Guangtu was silent and he didn't bother to ask who the so-called poor guy was. Anyway, he would see him later, and he was never very curious. "You slept for nearly 10 hours, and I want to know what happened during these 10 hours. What happened?" Jiang Shangyu also took out a cigarette and lit it. "Go ahead," Li Guangtu said with a poker face. He didn't think anything big could happen in 10 hours, but Jiang Shangyu suddenly said this at this time, so obviously something did happen. Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace turned against each other. Jiang Shangyu said simply, Li Guangtu glanced at Jiang Shangyu in surprise. The final battle of Beihai had just ended, and Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace turned against each other? Although he knew it would happen sooner or later, it was too fast. Did Li Tianlan make too much demand for the victory just now? But in the current situation of Beihai, what on earth did Li Tianlan make up his mind to turn against Wang Shengxiao? The most important thing was, Li Guangtu thought for a moment. Is Wang Shengxiao still alive? Of course. Jiang Shangyu laughed. Not only is he alive, but he's living very well. When we were still hiding in the hotel, Wang Shengxiao had already arrived in Kanglin. The joint forces were finished, and all the people of the joint forces in Kanglin were wiped out. Wang Shengxiao did it himself. He killed thousands of people of the joint forces alone. Li Guangtu's pupils suddenly contracted, and he didn't say anything for a while. A natural question had come to his mind. How is this possible? More than that, after solving the problem in Kanglin, Wang Shengxiao went to Tiannan and fought with Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu continued to speak. Wait. Li Guangtu frowned tightly. I was in a coma for 10 hours? He reconfirmed the time of his coma. Jiang Shangyu nodded. 10 hours. So, Li Guangtu took a deep breath and said, You want to tell me that Li Tianlan didn't die, but still has fighting capacity. In 10 hours, you and I both know Li Tianlan's sword at that time. We can feel his aura. In that case, it's incredible that Li Tianlan didn't die. Even if he was lucky, his foundation would have been destroyed. To say the least, he should at least be seriously injured and dying. It's only been 10 hours. How did he recover his fighting capacity? Jiang Shangyu was silent for a long time before he slowly said, I don't know. Li Guangtu still wanted to say something, but Jiang Shangyu had already shook his head and interrupted Li Guangtu. I know what you want to say. It may be incredible, but the fact is that Li Tianlan not only has the fighting capacity, but also has no sign of injury from all aspects of performance. Not only is he not injured, but from all aspects of performance, Li Tianlan is likely to have broken through the invincible realm. He is stronger than a few hours ago, much stronger. The muscles at the corner of Li Guangtu's mouth twitched uncontrollably. Of all the people, he was undoubtedly the last to hear the news. Others might have grudges against Li Tianlan, but he only had obsession with Li Tianlan. He wanted to take back everything that belonged to him. He wanted to take the Li family back to the peak position, instead of watching Li Tianlan push the Li family to the peak position. For Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace, he had too many complicated thoughts that he couldn't tell others. He saw Li Tianlan getting stronger and stronger, saw Emperor Dong's palace growing stronger, saw more and more helpers around him, saw more and more resources under his control, saw the purgatory of heaven capital being surpassed little by little, and then left further and further behind. Others saw it with fear. In Li Guangtu's eyes, all this made him extremely angry. Before Li Tianlan broke through the invincible realm, Li Guangtu was already no match for him. Now he officially entered the invincible realm. Li Guangtu only felt that his heart was very cold. It was cold without a trace of warmth. Invincible realm. The invincible realm of others was completely different from Li Tianlan's. The most intuitive point was that Li Tianlan had no bottleneck in the invincible realm. Not at all. His greatest piece was the threshold from half-step invincible realm to the invincible realm. Now he directly crossed over, which meant that Li Tianlan could stabilize his realm in the shortest time, and then reach the peak of the invincible realm. He could naturally break through the peak of the invincible realm to reach his current realm, and then surpass him and catch up with Wang Tianzong. Li Guangtu's heart kept sinking. For the first time in most of his life, he experienced the feeling of despair because of a piece of news. He had to kill him. He had to kill him as soon as possible. If it was any later, it would really be too late. Is that what you want to say? Li Guangtu's voice was low and hoarse. Jiang Shangyu looked at him, and a strange look flashed in his eyes. He could probably understand Li Guangtu's inner struggle and suffering at this time. But these emotions made him lose his usual sharpness. Jiang Shangyu shook his head, and didn't know how to evaluate the current Li Guangtu. He just said blandly, "These are two things." Li Guangtu froze and recalled the information that Jiang Shangyu told him. His eyes widened slightly. You mean Wang Xingxiao? Jiang Shangyu first mentioned Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao, who was almost completely ignored by him. His attention was focused on Li Tianlan. But he remembered Jiang Shangyu's words very clearly. Wang Xingxiao went to Tiannan and fought with Li Tianlan. And he was facing Li Tianlan after the breakthrough. And Wang Xingxiao was not dead yet. If Wang Xingxiao had been crushed in that battle, Jiang Shangyu would not have said so at all. So these were two things. Li Tianlan's breakthrough was one thing. Wang Xingxiao was the other thing. A gloomy look flashed across Jiang Shangyu's face. He nodded and said, although it's hard to believe, it turns out that Wang Xingxiao inexplicably has a very strong combat capability. According to his performance in Tiannan, his comprehensive strength is even not weaker than Wang Tianzong before the breakthrough. At present, my people can't determine the reason, but Wang Xingxiao's strength has soared. I want to say that now we are not only no match for Li Tianlan, but even if we are alone, I'm afraid we won't be a match for Wang Xingxiao. Li Guangtu sat stiffly in place and did not speak for a long time. There was a very clear stupor on his face and eyes. The silence had been going on. The shabby small cruise ship was bumping forward on the sea. What are you thinking about? Jiang Shangyu took the initiative to ask. Li Guangtu's body moved. He didn't seem to have changed, but his spirit seemed to have aged a lot all of a sudden. One day, Li Kuangtu shook his head and said, "It's not even a day. 10 hours. He laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "I suddenly find that I'm really old. It seems that my era is really going to pass." In my impression, Senior Li Kuangtu is not a person who will give up easily. Senior Li Kuangtu. It was the first time that Li Kuangtu heard Jiang Shangyu call him that. He shook his head and said, "I can't say that I give up. And this kind of thing can't be solved by giving up. Our only choice is to move forward." "That makes sense." Jiang Shangyu nodded. Li Kuangtu fell silent again and stopped talking. The cruise ship moved forward on the sea, and the outline of the island ahead had become clear. Li Kuangtu, who had been silent for a long time, let out a long sigh, stood up, and looked at the island ahead. Jiang Shangyu's fingers moved as if he wanted to stop something, but in the end he did not move. In the next second, Li Kuangtu's body suddenly tightened, and the aura all over his body suddenly became extremely sharp and cold. His injuries were still extremely severe, and his sword chi was not obvious. However, at this moment, his entire body seemed to have suddenly transformed into a divine weapon that revealed its edge, and his entire body carried a terrifying sharpness. Jiang Shangyu remained calm and lit another cigarette. Li Kuangtu's eyes narrowed slightly, and he stared at a figure on the shore. The figure stood in front of the small dock and seemed to be welcoming his cruise ship. When Li Kuangtu saw him, he also saw Li Kuangtu. The aura of the two of them was equally weak, but their eyes met in the air, sharp and gloomy, and there seemed to be sparks in the empty space. The whole sea suddenly had a very strong smell of gunpowder. "This is the distinguished guest you invited. That poor guy?" Li Kuangtu sneered, and his voice was cold without any warmth. "Yes." Jiang Shangyu lowered his voice slightly and said, "He is a good entry point for us." "I agree," Li Kuangtu said blandly. "In that case, you have a good cooperation. I won't accompany you." Jiang Shangyu was stunned. He knew. Li Kuangtu saw that the other party would have a reaction, but he did not expect that the reaction would be so big. This was completely the rhythm of directly turning hostile. Jiang Shangyu was a little helpless. "Senior, why are you so stubborn? We may not be able to let go of the past hatred, but at the moment, it is not the most important thing after all. His situation, my situation, and the situation of the purgatory of heaven capital are not good. The only thing we can do now is to completely concentrate all our forces together to have a chance." Li Kuangtu sneered and did not speak. Jiang Shangyu paused and whispered, "Senior, I can promise you that if today's cooperation can be reached, I will give you a satisfactory explanation." Li Kuangtu turned around and took a deep look at Jiang Shangyu. Jiang Shangyu's eyes met with his without any avoidance. Li Kuangtu turned around and said no more. The cruise ship slowly docked. Jiang Shangyu was the first to walk off the cruise ship. Li Kuangtu did not move. "Your Highness, welcome." Jiang Shangyu smiled and took the initiative to reach out to the person standing on the shore. "How is your injury?" "I won't die yet." Gu Xingyan shook his head, but his eyes were still looking at Li Kuangtu, who was still standing on the cruise ship. Gu Xingyan. Gu Xingyan, the god of war of Zhongzhou State. He betrayed the Li family more than 20 years ago. Gu Xingyan, who overthrew the Li family and besieged and killed Li Kuangtu. Who could have thought that after so many years when the two met again, it was not a fight to the death, but cooperation? Cooperation. Li Kuangtu's eyes flashed with killing intent. "Long time no see." Gu Xingyan took the initiative to speak. Li Kuangtu might not have expected to meet him. However, Gu Xingyan, who had been paying attention to the battle in Beihai, had long been mentally prepared for this. He knew that he would see Li Kuangtu, but he still appeared here. His intention would undoubtedly make Jiang Shangyu more happy. "You do it for your Li family, and I do it for my Gu family. All the grievances can be settled in the future. At least now, we have the same survival crisis and the same opponent." Gu Xingyan continued to speak. Li Kuangtu took a deep breath and slowly walked out of the cruise ship. "The infrastructure on the island is not perfect. Seniors, let's talk as we walk. Cooperation depends on sincerity, not on location." Jiang Shangyu smiled and said, "I chose this place mainly because it is hidden enough and convenient enough." "Hidden?" Does it make sense? Li Guangtu glanced at Gu Xingyun. As soon as he saw Gu Xingyun, he had already guessed the content of this cooperation. It still makes sense. Jiang Shangyu laughed. I want half. Without any roundabout or probing, Li Guangtu directly said. This is the bottom line. If there is no half, then there is no need to talk. Jiang Shangyu's expression froze slightly. Gu Xingyun was slightly stunned. And then a burst of anger rose directly from his heart. Perhaps many years ago, Gu Xingyun would be respectful to Li Guangtu. But now why? Impossible. Gu Xingyun directly sneered and said, Give you half? If I can give you half, why can't I give Li Tianlan half? At least if I give Li Tianlan half, I can get a clear promise, and I can keep more. We are standing here now to resist Li Tianlan. If I give him half of it, do you think he will still attack me? Yes, Jiang Shangyu suddenly said. Maybe not for the time being, but it will happen sooner or later. What about him? Gu Xingyun glanced at Jiang Shangyu coldly, and pointed to Li Guangtu. If I give him half, will he attack me? Jiang Shangyu frowned. There was no way to answer this question. Cooperation was cooperation. Not to mention whether this cooperation could succeed or not. Even if it could, it was just a simple cooperation. It did not mean that the two of them could laugh off the enmity. He wanted to say no, but this answer could not even deceive a 3-year-old child. Li Guangtu would also attack Kunlun City sooner or later. If this is his bottom line, then I think there is no need to talk this time. I can't agree. You two please help yourselves. Goodbye. Gu Xingyun said lightly. In such an obvious situation, no one was a fool, and no one could deceive anyone. Since there was no way to cooperate, there was no need to waste time. You two. Jiang Shangyu's tone became a little low. I think you still don't see the current situation clearly. The rise of Emperor Dong's palace is unstoppable. Our biggest advantage is that we can integrate into Zhongzhou State. We can't lose Zhongzhou State, especially for us. This is not only important in strategy, but also Zhongzhou State can be our talisman in many times. This is the case now. If we cooperate, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. If we don't cooperate, the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. Isn't it obvious enough? At this time, for some old grievances, do you have to go against the future? Li Guangtu was silent. Gu Xingyun also did not speak. The three of them looked at the waves around them and walked forward in silence. Your Highness, do you have any other choice? Jiang Shangyu glanced at Gu Xingyun and suddenly asked. Annan State has sent me an invitation. Gu Xingyun said lightly. Oh. Jiang Shangyu smiled. Vice President, Chief Commander of National Defense, God of War. Gu Xingyun laid out the bargaining chips of Annan State one by one and sighed softly. It's very tempting. Indeed. Jiang Shangyu nodded in agreement. Then why don't you go? With such wonderful conditions, it seems that there is no need to hesitate at all. Then why not? Or in other words, now that Li Tianlan is here, how many days can you enjoy if you go there? Gu Xingyun snorted and did not speak. Retreat. As early as after Li Tianlan attacked Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun had begun to think about the retreat. He was the god of war of Zhongzhou State, and the leader of the Special Warfare Group. This identity was destined to make it difficult for Li Tianlan to touch him in a short time, or even replace him in a short time. That was to say, Gu Xingyun was safe for the time being. In his position, if Li Tianlan wanted to make Kunlun City beyond redemption, the first thing he had to do was to let the new group suppress the Special Warfare Group, and then weaken and dismember the Special Warfare Group little by little. When Kunlun City completely became a general without an army, and was pushed by everyone, Li Tianlan would do his best to completely end Kunlun City. This was undoubtedly the way for Gu Xingyun to learn the lesson of the Li family. At that time, the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai worked together to form the Southeast Group. When summer solstice came to them to ask for cooperation, and secretly integrated the Southeast Group, the Li family was completely exposed without any protection. This was undoubtedly a failure. The Special Warfare Group was now Gu Xingyun's biggest protection. However, judging from the current development speed of Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace, The protection of the Special Warfare Group obviously could not keep the wind and rain for too long. As Li Tianlan became stronger and stronger, the whole Special Warfare Group might soon be completely smashed by Li Tianlan. If Gu Xingyun put down his pride, he could still shamelessly stay in the position of the god of war for a few years. But he had been preparing for a retreat. Annan State seemed to be a good choice. The other party was very sincere. As long as Gu Xingyun was willing to go there, all the other parties' promises would be fulfilled immediately. But the so-called going there was not a job hopping from the company. Seriously speaking, as long as Gu Xingyun went there, it meant that Kunlun City and Gu Xingyun officially committed treason. The god of war openly committed treason. Zhongzhou State was bound to be furious. This kind of anger was not incompetence, but it had to be put into action. Zhongzhou State also had the strength to put into action. The biggest source of confidence came from Li Tianlan. Gu Xingyun believed that as long as he publicly went to Annan State, Li Tianlan would take the order of Zhongzhou State and directly kill him in Annan State in the shortest time without any mercy. What could Annan State say to deal with the traitor of treason? Even if they could say something, who would listen to them? Maybe Li Tianlan had been waiting for this day. Jiang Shangyu asked him how long he could enjoy an Annan State. It would not take long at all. He might even die in Li Tianlan's hands in less than a day. So although this seemingly good option had been hovering in Gu Xingyun's mind, he never dared to do it. He originally wanted to linger on in Zhongzhou State for a few years to see the situation. But he received a call from Jiang Shangyu. The cooperation was proposed by Jiang Shangyu. Gu Xingyun thought about it and felt more interested. So he came here. This cooperation might still seem risky, but at least it was more reliable than escaping to Annan State. Only half. This was completely beyond the bottom line that Gu Xingyun could accept. He would not choose Annan State, but there was no need to choose Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu. He could also choose to surrender to Li Tianlan. Li Guangtu and Li Tianlan would deal with him in the end. If he surrendered to Li Tianlan, at least he could live longer. If you have the intention, many details need to be discussed. Jiang Shangyu said faintly, "How's the treason case going?" The treason case of the Special Warfare Group. This had now become one of the biggest focuses of Zhongzhou State. Because of this case, almost all the middle and high-level officials of the Special Operations Bureau of Yuzhou were replaced, followed by Tianjin, then Yanzhou and Dongshan. The influence was getting bigger and bigger. The Special Warfare Group also became unstable with the expanding treason case. The Prince Group and the Special Warfare Group were in turmoil at the same time. During this time, Zhongzhou State was quite lively. It's still going on. Gu Xingyun's face was a little pale. In fact, the treason case was caused by him, and now it was completely out of control. He was confident that he would not be involved in the treason case, but to achieve this goal, he did not know how many people would be sacrificed. Until now, don't you understand what the treason case is all about? Jiang Shangyu said with a smile. What do you mean? Gu Xingyun's eyes suddenly condensed, and he stared at Jiang Shangyu. The treason case was the most passive one for him in recent years. At the beginning, he thought about struggling and cutting the Gordian knot. But the more he struggled, the more passive he became. Until now, there was almost no room for him to intervene in the task force of the treason case. It was a very hidden thing, but now it is suddenly exposed. Have you never suspected the Burning Legion? Never suspected Ramalan? Jiang Shangyu asked with some doubts. Gu Xingyun's face instantly became livid. Ramalan. The Burning Legion. Of course he had doubts. But he could not think of a reason for the Burning Legion to betray him. It was simply impossible. Over the years, he had used his power to give the Burning Legion countless support. Ramalan could be said to be loyal to him. What reason did he have to betray him? If he betrayed him, who could he turn to? Impossible. Gu Xingyun took a deep breath and said slowly. He did not believe that there was something wrong with the Burning Legion. He would rather believe that there was something wrong with someone in the special warfare system. Nothing is impossible. Jiang Shangyu shook his head. I think the connection between you and the Burning Legion should not be known by many people in the Special Warfare Group, right? This should be a top secret. At most 2 or 3 people, including you, know it. Obviously they can't leak it, so it can only be the Burning Legion's problem. I have a lot of evidence to show that you have supported the Burning Legion all these years, but Ramelun is just using you, or the Wang family of Beihai is using you. Ramelun had experience in the Divine Martial Army a few years ago. Strictly speaking, he is the second force supported by the Wang family of Beihai in Africa. He has always been a member of the Wang family of Beihai, and the Burning Legion has always been a force of the Wang family of Beihai. Gu Xingyun's body trembled slightly. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, "This is impossible. If you want to see the evidence, when we go back, I can give you a lot of evidence." At that time, you asked the Burning Legion to deal with Emperor Dong's palace, and those seriously injured people. In fact, Beihai also had such a request. If not, you should have been able to detect the problem at that time. Jiang Shangyu felt a little regretful. The Burning Legion is not on good terms with the Divine Martial Army in Africa land, and even many people of the Divine Martial Army died in the hands of the Burning Legion. Doesn't this prove? No. Jiang Shangyu directly interrupted Gu Xingyun's words. This can't prove anything. They are just some chess pieces. The Divine Martial Army is so big. How can all of them be direct descendants? They have enough chess pieces to show off some things and trick some fools. He looked at Gu Xingyun with pity. Obviously you've been fooled. If that's the case, why didn't the Burning Legion participate in the decisive battle in Beihai? Gu Xingyun was still not convinced. Because Wang Shengxiao never thought that he would lose. For them, the longer this chess piece is hidden, the more power it can exert. Judging from the conflict between the Burning Legion and Li Tianlan, they would rather let the Burning Legion hide and let Li Tianlan fight. They don't want to see any variables. Jiang Shangyu shook his head. Your Highness, it's meaningless for us to argue about this here. If you want evidence, I can get it to you at any time. It's some information I've collected recently. If you look at it separately, there's no problem. But if you look at it together, it's very interesting. Even in many cases, some things that the Burning Legion does seem to be unrelated are to achieve the goals of the Wang family of Beihai. So I'm very sure that the Burning Legion belongs to the Wang family of Beihai. It's a chess piece that they have hidden deeply. The treason case of the Special Warfare Group is completely a bomb in the hands of the Wang family of Beihai. When they need the bomb to explode, it will explode. As soon as Li Tianlan left the prison, the treason case broke out. Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? Gu Xingyun was silent and said nothing. His face was extremely gloomy. Do you want to hear my advice? Jiang Shangyu looked at Gu Xingyun and laughed softly. Say it. Gu Xingyun gritted his teeth and squeezed out a word. Cut the Gordian knot. At this time, don't care about the loss. The most important thing is to get out as soon as possible. At present, you can't leave Zhongzhou State, so you have to make yourself have no weaknesses that can be attacked. The Special Warfare Group can be abandoned, and it's just in time to prepare for our cooperation. Jiang Shangyu said lightly. Gu Xingyun's expression was slightly distorted. Abandon the rook to save the king? Break the arm to survive. Compared with Jiang Shangyu's words, such words were nothing. This was simply self-mutilation to survive. I can be sure that if you don't give up and want to keep more, there will be more explosive news in the Burning Legion. At that time, the Special Warfare Group may really be finished. Now the Prince Group can't even take care of itself, and you can't even find the most basic allies. The giant group is in the ascendant, and it's too easy to take you down. The new group doesn't mind taking something from the Special Warfare Group at all. Jiang Shangyu said casually, so we have to be fast. We have to be fast. Cut everything off, and then we cooperate to make them unable to react. This is also the purpose of our meeting here today. Gu Xingyun kept taking deep breaths. After a while he suddenly said, I want to see the evidence in your hands. No problem, I can give it to you when we go back. Jiang Shangyu nodded. But I advise you not to do anything now. In your current state, you may not be able to take down Ramiro. If you want to retaliate against him, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. I don't want to retaliate against him. The ferocious look in Gu Xingyun's eyes was extremely terrifying. I want to completely destroy the Burning Legion. Jiang Shangyu smiled and said nothing. I can cooperate with you. Gu Xingyun forced himself to calm down and said blandly, it's impossible to give you half. He glanced at Li Guangtu. I'll give you 30%. He looked at Jiang Shangyu again. You also get 30%. I'll keep 40%. Li Guangtu just wanted to say something, but Jiang Shangyu grabbed him and said with a smile, that's fine, but our 30% must be practical. I know what to do. Gu Xingyun said with a straight face. 30%, 30%, 40%. It was not about interests. It was about duties. To be more precise, it was about the whole Special Warfare Group, which was the countless special warfare agencies in the dark world of Zhongzhou State. Gu Xingyun would completely get rid of the influence of the treason case and give up everything that could be given up. Then he would push Li Guangtu and Jiang Shangyu's people to the vacant positions in the shortest time and regain his foothold. In this way, the Special Warfare Group would become a brand new Special Warfare Group with Jiang Shangyu. One was Jiang Shangyu, Li Guangtu and Gu Xingyun. The power of the entire Beijiang would completely join the camp of the Special Warfare Group. In terms of experts, the Purgatory of Heaven capital would have enough experts to fill the vacancy. With the foundation of Gu Xingyun's many years of operation, such a combination was enough to fight with Li Tianlan's new group in Zhongzhou State. You won't be disappointed. Jiang Shangyu smiled. Your Highness, maybe you've given up a lot of things, but one day you'll know that cooperating with us is the best decision for you. You gave up some things in Zhongzhou State, but in the whole dark world, you'll get more. The whole dark world. Gu Xingyun muttered to himself in a low voice. We'll go to Europe next, integrate the power of the Sanctuary and Knights Templars, and then go to America. So to be clear, we're very strong, and we have a lot of elites that can be used. Not only Zhongzhou State, but the whole dark world will be the battlefield of our three-party game. Our lineup is luxurious enough. I hope so. Gu Xingyun nodded, then shook his head and sighed deeply. The three of them talked for nearly 3 hours on this island, and Gu Xingyun left with a solemn face. Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu, who hadn't talked much, watched Gu Xingyun's back as he left. They watched him board the cruise ship, and watched the cruise ship go farther and farther, until it completely disappeared from sight. Then Li Guangtu slowly said, what do you want to say? He has difficulties. As a partner, we naturally have to think about him. Senior, 50% is too much for you. He can't give it to you. Jiang Shangyu smiled. Impossible. Li Guangtu sneered. 50%? Who does he think he is? If it weren't for those messy things in those years, it would have been mine. That's true. Jiang Shangyu nodded. But how can there be so many ifs in the world? Those things have happened. Now the special warfare system is Gu Xingyun's life. It's impossible for him to give you half of it. But if he can't give it to you, I can compensate you. Oh, Li Guangtu's expression changed slightly. After all, the foundation of the Jiang family is still a little weak. Jiang Shangyu shook his head helplessly. Although Beijiang is large, the Jiang family has not accumulated many masters over the years, and there are even fewer who can be inserted into the special warfare system. Our Jiang family can occupy at most 10% of the positions. I'm afraid the remaining 20% will have to trouble you, Senior. Jiang Shangyu paused and said with some regret. In fact, there are still many candidates in the Knights Templar. Unfortunately, if they are yellow people, these things will be easy to handle. Now we can only rely on the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The corner of Li Guangtu's mouth rose slightly for a moment, and he slowly said, there are still many people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. That's good. Jiang Shangyu looked sincere, but he had already begun to think. He gave Li Guangtu 2/3 of his 30% of the positions, which meant that once the cooperation between the two sides began, the Purgatory of Heaven capital would occupy more positions in the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State than Kunlun City. Gu Xingyun would naturally be dissatisfied. It seemed that he had to compensate Gu Xingyun in other ways. Jiang Shangyu had a headache. He rubbed between his eyebrows and suddenly said, Senior, I've always been curious. Why do you have such a great hostility to Li Tianlan? I'm not hostile to him. Li Guangtu shook his head. It's just that the Li family is mine. He's not a member of the Li family, so he doesn't deserve to own the Li family. I know something about this. Jiang Shangyu smiled. Li Tianlan is the son of Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian. Dongqing Rushi is your daughter. Daughter, it was a beautiful trick. The whole Zhongzhou state has been deceived for many years. He paused and suddenly a person came to mind. The smile on the corner of his mouth grew wider. Li Guangtu actually had a son. Jiang Shangyu knew this very well. He thought of the battlefield, which he didn't know whether it was in the past or in the future, and Dongqing Huangtu came to mind. He didn't participate in the siege of Dongqing Huangtu that year. However, he knew very well who had participated in that battle. Especially those high-end forces. Wang Tianzong was one. Li Guangtu in front of him was one. And Li Guangtu's son was also one. Emperor Hou. The father and son could be said to be the absolute main force in that siege. Jiang Shangyu sighed in his heart and continued. But Dongqing Rushi and Li Tianlan have an engagement. If they have children in the future, they will also be the blood of the Li family. Senior, do you think that child is not worthy to inherit the Li family? Or senior, are you worried that the child who inherits the Li family in the future is not the child of Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi, but the child of Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai? Li Guangtu was silent for a long time, and then slowly said, Li Tianlan is not worthy. Jiang Shangyu didn't let go of this topic. He just said lightly, but the Li family will always be inherited. Li Guangtu turned and looked at Jiang Shangyu silently. After a long time he said, What do you want to say? Senior, what do you think of me? Jiang Shangyu smiled reservedly. I don't know if I'm worthy of your daughter in your heart. Li Guangtu was stunned for a long time before he understood. You want Rushi? Dongqing Rushi? Jiang Shangyu smiled and said, She should not belong to me, but Dongqing Yueshan or Li Yueshan should belong to me. If we can be together, in the future, our child will be surnamed Li and inherit everything of the Li family. What do you think, senior? Li Guangtu looked at Jiang Shangyu with a faint smile. Rushi and Moon God are just two personalities. I don't mind those. Jiang Shangyu shook his head. Why have you given up the girl from Kunlun City? Li Guangtu continued to ask. Jiang Shangyu smiled and said nothing. Li Qingqing in this era should also belong to Jiang Shangyu. But it was another Jiang Shangyu. And he only wanted Li Yueshan. I can promise you. And convince Moon God. Li Guangtu slowly turned around and looked at the endless sea ahead. But you have to wait until Li Tianlan dies. The plane moved all the way over Nanyan province. Li Tianlan casually looked at the sea of clouds outside the window, and listened to military counselor reporting the goal of this trip in front of him. Your Majesty, our team is full of very professional talents, and there is also a very professional negotiation team. I have had a brief communication with others on the phone, but they hope to meet with Your Majesty in the near future. Military counselor said slowly. Li Tianlan withdrew his gaze and glanced at him. He handed him a cigarette and said, People from the North Group? A lot of them are. Military counselor nodded. The North Group was the focus of military counselor's strategy over the years. This group, which had been glorious but now was getting more and more down but was unwilling to withdraw from the power stage, undoubtedly needed some new changes. Some of military counselor's ideas could be said to hit it off well with them. And Li Tianlan's new group could not be separated from the support of the North Group in all aspects. No new group could promote new people at will. The so-called new of the new group referred to the position. And people were, after all, a new circle formed by people who had reached a certain status. Some of the capable people of the North Group, some of the capable people of the Giant Group, and some of the remaining power of the Li family were the new group that was about to be formed. Li Tianlan was very familiar with the Giant Group, but he had almost no dealings with the North Group. It was completely understandable that some people of the North Group were eager to meet Li Tianlan. You arrange it. Li Tianlan said slowly. Well, tonight. We should visit Minister Zhou first. Military counselor said with a smile. Li Tianlan replied with a hum. Zhou Yunhai, one of the directors of Zhongzhou State. He would still be the leader of the North Group after the election, and would not join the new group. But meeting with him now was undoubtedly one of the highlights of this trip to Yuzhou. Later, we will roughly analyze the bottom line of the Prince Group and delineate some important targets. Your Majesty, the most important thing for us this time is to grab all the important resources of the Prince Group and hold them in our hands, so that the development of the new group in the future will be much smoother. Military Counselor continued. Okay. Li Tianlan took a drag on his cigarette. But for me the most important thing is Chen Fangqing. Now the result is very obvious. The Prince Group will be weakened. This is your business. Chen Fangqing must die. This is the most important thing. He can't hold on for long. Military Counselor smiled meaningfully. The Prince Group is now very chaotic. Although it has been less than a day since the end of the final battle in Beihai, there has been a lot of noise. If nothing goes wrong, within a month, Chen Fangqing should leave the stage with the excuse that he needs to recuperate. When he is abandoned by the Prince Group, everything else will be very easy to handle. Li Tianlan replied with a hum. Now the most important thing to guard against is the Southeast Group. Military Counselor frowned. Wang Shengxiao suddenly rose. And I just heard from Your Majesty that he seems to have strong reinforcements. Then our previous agreement with Beihai will probably be changed. They are eager to get a piece of the pie. In the past 2 years, they have lost much more than we have. Now that Wang Shengxiao has confidence, their mentality will inevitably change. I'm afraid that the action of the Southeast Group will cause some new variables. And then I'm afraid it will be very troublesome. Just deal with it as it comes. Li Tianlan shook his head. No matter how their mentality changes, they won't turn their attention to us in a short time. We eat meat from the Prince Group, and we can give them some soup. If they don't know what's good for them, I don't mind going to Beihai again. A Prince Group is not enough. Just take down the Special Warfare Group. Qin Weibai, who was beside him, suddenly said. Li Tianlan was stunned and repeated. Take down the Special Warfare Group? I've been preparing for this for a long time. At present, I have a lot of information. I'll sort it out after arriving in Yuzhou. Qin Weibai nodded. At that time, I still need to discuss with Minister Dongcheng. Even if we can't completely destroy the Special Warfare Group, we should be able to completely destroy Kunlun City. This part of the benefits can only belong to us, and the Southeast Group can't get involved. Li Tianlan took a deep look at him and touched his hair. Bang! Li Tianlan's body suddenly shook. Blood gushed out of his nostrils and mouth without warning. Li Tianlan was a little annoyed. This is the 3rd time. Is there any solution? Qin Weibai frowned. Li Tianlan picked up a handkerchief and wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth and nose. Feeling a little helpless. This was not an injury at all. It was related to the second heart. The second heart beat very slowly, but every time it beat, it would bring up a large amount of energy. In short, Li Tianlan's blood and qi were too vigorous now. Every time the second heart beat, it exceeded the load of his body, so some blood would gush out of the corners of his mouth and nose. There's no solution for the time being. Li Tianlan shook his head. It still needs time. He could feel that with every beat of his second heart, his body would become slightly stronger. When the strength of the body and the blood and qi in the body reached a balance, this problem would naturally disappear. The phone suddenly rang. Li Tianlan took out his mobile phone and looked at it. He slightly raised his eyebrows and directly answered it. Li Baitian's figure appeared directly on the mobile phone screen with a helpless look. What's going on? Li Tianlan laughed. He hadn't seen such a bitter expression on Li Baitian's face for a long time. I've been set up by a woman. Li Baitian was a little annoyed. Now I have a problem for you to solve. Do you know this person? The camera turned. An enchanting but cold beautiful woman appeared in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan froze for a moment. He looked at her for a while and said, "She looks a little familiar." He did feel that she looked a little familiar, but for a moment, he couldn't remember where he had seen her. "Your Majesty, I'm my Shiranui." On the screen, my Shiranui bowed deeply to the camera. "That's her." Li Baitian's voice sounded. "She is willing to join Emperor Dong's palace with all the power and resources of Liuhua Palace, but her only requirement is that she hopes to be your woman. She said that if you agree, she can dedicate everything to you. If you don't agree, she will kill me and run away. You see, it's difficult. It's really a problem. Li Baiqian's face appeared on the screen again. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and looked at Li Baiqian. Do you have anything to say? Me. Li Baiqian said with a headache. What do I want to say? She's going to kill me. Damn it, help. Chapter 1069. Li Baiqian shouted to Li Tianlan for help, but his eyes kept drifting to Qin Weibai beside Li Tianlan. No matter how ridiculous my Shiranui's request was, at least Li Baiqian could see that she was serious. Her eyes were filled with despair and longing, and it was all too real. It was the despair of the current situation. It was also the desire to be Li Tianlan's woman. Such eyes really made Li Baiqian a little flustered. Of course, Li Baiqian was afraid of death. But he had been alone for nearly 30 years, and most of the time he didn't have so many scruples. But if he died here, it would be a little ridiculous and worthless. His realm was close to the half-step invincible realm, and his life could be said to have just begun. If he died here because his good brother didn't agree to her request, Li Baiqian felt that he could be said to be the most aggrieved superior in the history of Emperor Dong's palace. Ahem. Li Baiqian gave a dry cough and looked at Qin Weibai's expression with his eyes drifting. His voice became more erratic. In my opinion, in fact, it's not bad to agree. My Shiranui was a beauty, a great beauty. No one in the dark world could deny this. Whether in the heyday of Liuhua Palace or in the years when the purgatory of Heaven Capital occupied East Island, few people in the dark world of East Island recognized my Shiranui as the young heavenly son of East Island. But her beauty made countless people in the dark world drool. At least Li Tianlan wouldn't suffer a loss if he accepted her, and it would help Emperor Dong's palace better control East Island. After all, the influence of Liuhua Palace in East Island couldn't be underestimated. As for my Shiranui's ambition, it was her ambition to be Li Tianlan's woman. But with Qin Weibai, how much trouble could my Shiranui make? No one would worry about this at all. Really? Before Li Tianlan could answer, Qin Weibai had already asked with a faint smile. Li Tianlan raised his hand subconsciously and rubbed his forehead. He had long noticed some special reactions from Qin Weibai when it came to this kind of thing. It was hard to explain in words. But the most basic thing was that Qin Weibai was also a woman, and women would definitely be jealous. What surprised Li Tianlan was that Qin Weibai had never been jealous when it came to Dongqing Rushi and Wang Yuedong. But when it came to other women, the change in her attitude was extremely obvious. Others naturally did not notice this. They thought that Qin Weibai did not mind him expanding his harem at all. It was a beautiful thought, but how could it be possible? Xianyuan Wushang, who was sitting not far from Li Tianlan, twitched his mouth and seemed to want to come over and say something. But in the end, he just sat there without moving. At this moment, he really wanted to see what the man who dared to suggest that Li Tianlan accept other women in front of Qin Weibai looked like. In some ways, he knew a lot of things that Qin Weibai didn't know, so he could also understand why Qin Weibai didn't mind the existence of Wang Yuedong and Dongqing Rushi. This phenomenon couldn't be explained specifically for the time being. If he really had to give an answer, he could only say that it was a residual instinct in some aspects. But the other women, Xianyuan Wushang couldn't help but walk over and glance at the screen. On the screen, Li Baiqian was having a headache. Looking at this face that he had never seen before, Xianyuan Wushang imagined countless miserable images of the other party, and then sat back with satisfaction. Tell me what you can do. Li Tianlan, who had been silent, suddenly said. On the screen, Li Baiqian was stunned. 2 seconds later, my Shiranui's soft and gentle voice sounded. Within 5 years, I can reach the invincible realm, and the invincible realm is not my end. There will be a place for me in the future of Emperor Dong's palace. I can give everything of Liuhua Palace to your majesty. If your majesty trusts Liuhua Palace, we can also participate in the integration of East Island. In addition, I can persuade some consortia in East Island to support Emperor Dong's palace. My Shiranui paused and continued. In addition, I'm still a virgin. I can give your majesty, with some hesitation, She thought about it and said a Chinese word that was not very familiar with. Have children? Qin Weibai lowered her head and gently played with Li Tianlan's fingers, saying nothing. I don't need it, Li Tianlan said blandly. He was not being pretentious. He did see my Shiranui in East Island, but her appearance had long faded. He took a look at her again just now and didn't think there was anything amazing about her. It might make sense that home flowers were not as fragrant as wild flowers, but it was not very convincing in front of Qin Weibai. Li Tianlan was wondering about Qin Weibai's attitude toward Dongqing Rushi and Wang Yuetong. But even he himself did not realize that after he had Qin Weibai and accepted Wang Yuetong and Dongqing Rushi, he had never been attracted to other women. Not at all. I need a secretary here. Li Tianlan looked at Han Xinyan, who was buried in the documents beside him, and continued, Personal secretary, if you are interested, you can come here. I don't need you to help me organize East Island, but if you can get my trust, I can give you a chance. When you enter the invincible realm, I can let you manage the dark world of East Island. Don't worry, the royal family can't do anything to you. The position you are worried about will not be a problem at that time. There was silence on the other end of the phone. If possible, I still hope. You are not qualified to negotiate with me. Li Tianlan interrupted my Shiranui directly. Li Beitian is still with me, my Shiranui said after a moment of silence. If you kill him, the royal family of East Island won't dare to take you in. Li Tianlan took a sip of tea and said calmly, I said so. My Shiranui fell completely silent. Li Tianlan looked at Li Beitian and said slowly, Bring her back. Li Beitian nodded and smiled. Got it. The video call was hung up directly. In Liuhua Palace, Li Beitian held the phone and looked at my Shiranui, who still kept her head down. My Shiranui's aura fluctuated slightly, and her face was expressionless. If you don't agree with this result, Li Beitian looked at her helplessly. Then I have to work hard. Personal secretary. My Shiranui looked up at Li Beitian. What is it? Li Beitian thought about it seriously. Senior officials at the governor level of Zhongzhou State would actually have personal secretaries, but they were all of the same sex. The personal secretary of the opposite sex represented too many possibilities. Li Beitian grunted and said slowly, Probably a personal maid? Can you understand the word maid? Or should I say, personal maid? Personal maid? My Shiranui's eyes were in a trance. That's about it. Do you think it doesn't fit your identity? Li Beitian chuckled and said, But what is your identity? Potential? Strength? Influence? You're not the top. As for appearance, you have no advantage. To be honest, your request is a little too much, even whimsical. I don't mean to humiliate you, but there is no illusion in Emperor Dong's palace. What do you want? You have to fight for it yourself. What do you want? Judging from what you have, what qualifications do you have to be the hostess of Emperor Dong's palace? Personal mate. In my opinion, this identity is just right. My Shiranui stood where she was and thought silently for a long time. Li Beitian quietly looked at the flying snow around Liuhua Palace. He seemed to be as steady as an old dog, but in fact he was flustered. After a long time, my Shiranui moved her body and whispered, I accept this identity. Chapter 1070. The ship was rocking and the water was rising and falling. The blood-red setting sun slowly fell silent on the surface of the sea as far as the eye could see. The clouds in the distance were still shining with the afterglow of the day, but the surrounding sky had already begun to gradually darken. Gu Xingyan opened his eyes from meditation, and felt that his energy had recovered a little. The pain in every part of his body still existed. His internal organs twitched slightly as he breathed. His heartbeat was much faster than normal. Gu Xingyan silently felt the injuries on his body, with no expression on his face. Since it was severely injured by Situ Tsangyue with the murderous weapon-setting sun in Lin, and a few years ago, the light of the whole Kunlun city seemed to have completely dimmed. All the sharpness of the Special Warfare Center of Zhongzhou State seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Not long ago, after it was officially defeated by a sword chi doppelganger of Li Tianlan, All the honor and dignity that Kunlun City had been trying to maintain for many years seemed to have directly disappeared at that moment. There were people who took advantage of the situation and added insult to injury. As the treason case of the Special Warfare Group became more and more serious, almost all the people who paid attention to this incident began to slowly jump out to compete for the interests of the Special Warfare Group. The losses were manifold. The position of the Special Warfare System had changed. There was a change of leadership within the group. The commercial sector was annexed and annexed. The entire group was in a state of panic. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. The situation of the Special Warfare Group was getting worse day by day. In the most desperate time, Gu Xingyun, whose heart was extremely cold, really thought about leaving Zhongzhou State with a lot of secrets. Anan was not the only one who began to contact him secretly. There was even Star State, a superpower in the world whose comprehensive strength was second only to Zhongzhou State. The promise of this kind of superpower was naturally not as good as that of Anan. But now there were few experts in the dark world. His strength, which was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm, was worthy of the position of national war god in any country except Zhongzhou State. A superpower like the Star Nation would undoubtedly be able to guarantee the safety of Gu Xingyun and the entire Gu clan. Gu Xingyun was eager to make a move. He was about to make a decision. But every time he thought of Emperor Dong's palace, his determination would be shaken. In the face of traitors, Zhongzhou State had never been polite at all. This was the real zero tolerance. If it was before, Gu Xingyun might not have so many concerns. But Li Tianlan's rapid rise was enough to make everyone feel uneasy. The increasingly close cooperation between Emperor Dong's palace and Zhongzhou State was enough. He knew an undeniable fact. Zhongzhou State, with Li Tianlan, had the power to kill anyone at any time and any place. What was the value of a peak expert? What was the deterrence of a peak expert? That's what it is. In the era of nuclear deterrence, a real large-scale overall war was almost unlikely to happen. Even if Gu Xingyun committed treason, Zhongzhou State could not start a war involving the whole world. A division, a legion, a war zone, millions of soldiers, countless high-tech weapons. These were not enough for Zhongzhou State to break into Star State and kill Gu Xingyun, who had committed treason. But Li Tianlan could do it. Therefore, it was only natural that he was more valuable and more powerful than an army of 1 million soldiers and countless high-tech weapons. Gu Xingyun was very clear about this. He knew that if he committed treason, he would die no matter where he went. But if he left Zhongzhou State, even if he would die, at least his Gu family would still have a place to live. If he stayed in Zhongzhou State, when Li Tianlan dismantled the Special Warfare Group, he and the entire Gu family would die without a burial place. Gu Xingyun faced an extremely important choice. Either he could rely on the Special Warfare Group to resist Emperor Dong's palace to the end and live or die, or he could sacrifice himself and let the Gu family leave Zhongzhou State and lie dormant, waiting for a chance to rise again. No one could make a choice easily. Gu Xingyun didn't even really make up his mind until the end of the decisive battle in Beihai. Just when he was most hesitant and tangled, Jiang Shangyu called. So Gu Xingyun appeared on the small island. So he appeared here, and was ready to return to Zhongzhou State. To cooperate with Li Guangtu. To give up most of his duties in the Special Warfare Group. These were very difficult for him to accept. But Jiang Shangyu gave him a promise that he couldn't refuse. A promise that he still felt was worth it even after he had paid such a huge price. Night fell over the ocean. Gu Xingyun stood up, took out his mobile phone and dialed a number. The phone was quickly connected. "Uncle, this is Gu Ci." A steady and gentle voice sounded from the other end of the phone. "Sort out the list of important people in the group. Prepare a copy of everyone's information in detail." Gu Xingyun said slowly. Special Warfare Group. He naturally had the list of important internal personnel in his mind. But now he needed to connect all these people together and see the structure of the entire Special Warfare Group from the clearest perspective. Then he would completely break up the structure. Gu Ci was naturally not his nephew, but he was close to him. Originally, Gu Hanshan's existence had covered the edge of all the young generation of Kunlun City. However, Gu Hanshan had been defeated by Li Tianlan in the final maneuver of the two academies a few years ago. For a few years he had been stagnant. His martial arts realm had not advanced but regressed, and he had become more and more decadent. Gu Xingyun had either recuperated or dealt with open and covert attacks from all sides in the past few years. He had talked to Gu Hanshan, but how could he have time to pay attention to it all the time? Under such circumstances, the young generation of Kunlun City began to emerge gradually. Gu Xi was the most outstanding one. He was nearly 30 years old, and was in the thunder-shocking realm. He was not a top genius, but he was meticulous, steady, and well-behaved. Seeing him, Gu Xingyun felt like seeing himself when he was young. During this period he had been taking Gu Xi with him, and now Gu Xi was his secretary. Okay. Gu Xi responded. Gu Xingyun nodded, thought for a moment, and continued. In addition, I need your evaluation of everyone on this list. I will return to Kunlun City before dawn, and then I want to see the specific information. Got it, Gu Xi said. Seeing that Gu Xingyun had no other orders, he hung up the phone. Gu Xingyun put down his mobile phone and looked at the sea in the distance under the night sky, silent like a statue. The Special Warfare Group was his lifelong effort, and it was a fortress that he had tried his best to build. And this fortress was about to be smashed by his own hands. It was hard to describe what it felt like. Depression, unwillingness, anger, hatred, expectation. There were some of them. Under the almost heart-wrenching pain, the only thing he looked forward to was the promise that Jiang Shangyu gave him that could allow him and the Gu family to continue to survive in Zhongzhou State. The promise that made his heart burn when he thought of it. Jiang Shangyu's promise was simple and amazing. Within 3 months, Jiang Shangyu could completely recover from his injury. Within half a year, he could enter the peak of the invincible realm. Within a year, Jiang Shangyu could help him break through the peak of the invincible realm and directly reach Li Guangtu's current level. It seemed to be an extremely absurd promise. But Jiang Shangyu used himself as an example, and the clear reality was placed in front of Gu Xingyun. Gu Xingyun had to believe it. Chapter 1071. Thick smoke floated in the antique office. The atmosphere was so oppressive that people could hardly breathe. The middle-aged secretary, who could be said to be in a high position to some extent, walked in with 2 cups of tea, and then walked out carefully. He appeared to be very calm, but whether it was his expression or his footsteps, it was obvious that he was panicking. Chun Fangqing sat on the sofa in a daze, holding a cigarette and looking at the teacup in front of him motionless. The severe headache persisted, as if it was about to tear his entire spirit apart. The clock on the wall ticked away, making a crisp sound, but in Chun Fangqing's ears, it was incomparably ear-piercing. Every time the second hand ticked, he seemed to be closer to the end of the world. It was indeed the end. His end, the end of the Chun family, the end of the Prince Group, and the end of the Dark World. In less than 24 hours, the result of the decisive battle in Beihai had officially spread throughout the Dark World. There were too many things worth mentioning in the decisive battle in Beihai. But all of this was not important. What mattered was the result. It was a result so cruel that no one could accept it. 24 hours. The flames of war spread throughout the Dark World. When all the results were gathered together, a shocking battlefield was presented in front of everyone's eyes. 22 hours ago, thousands of elites of the joint forces besieged the headquarters of the Dark Knights. In a situation that no one had expected, the Snowdance Corps left Reki City for the first time and entered Northern Europe. Thousands of elites of the joint forces were wiped out. 21 hours ago, Jiang Shangyu was defeated by Li Tianlan and escaped from Xianyuan City. 20 hours ago, the elites of the Rothschild family went out and joined forces with the Samsara Palace to rush into the Holy Land. The Holy Disarmament Corps suffered heavy casualties, the Holy Land was in a mess, and the Pope was missing. 20 hours ago, the second batch of the Snowdance Corps set foot in Snow Country. The 3 secret bases that Wang Xiaoyao had developed on the border of Snow Country over the years were directly wiped out. Then the Snowdance Corps ran amok in Snow Country, and some secret strongholds belonging to Wang Xiaoyao were uprooted. 18 hours ago, the Men in Black, the Heroes Club, fantasy world, and many other dark forces gathered in Southern America. 16 secret bases of the Jiang family of South America were completely destroyed overnight, and there was a violent explosion at the headquarters of the Jiang family of South America. 17 hours ago, the Sea of Beihai completely fell. 16 hours ago, Li Tianlan officially arrived in Beihai province. All the weapon systems in East Island were completely out of control. The 3 fleets got out of control and sailed into the waters of Zhongzhou state. 14 hours ago, all the high-end forces in North Sea had begun their counterattack. Shenzhou, Liuli, and other cities had restored basic order 13 hours ago. Jiang Shangyu and the others arrived at Mount Dibing. 11 hours ago, the Supreme Grandmaster of East Island, Yagyu Kuromi, Tianhai Wuji, and Jiang Guochu died. Wang Xiaoyao withdrew from the battlefield with serious injuries, Mochizuki Song was seriously injured, and Moraid was seriously injured. The bright moon rose above the North Sea province. 10 hours ago, Wang Shengxiao arrived at Kanglan Group. 9 hours ago, the news of the final battle in Beihai had officially spread throughout the dark world. Until now, all the forces were not sure what the news meant, nor could they be sure what kind of impact the battle in North Sea would have on the dark world. But the most direct observation is that the entire dark world withered overnight. Now most of the famous forces in the dark world died in Beihai. The rest were either small forces with insufficient strength or behemoths like Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. As for Zhongzhou state, all the pawns of Zhongzhou state lurking in Beihai were completely lost. Especially when East Island fell, Emperor Dong's palace swept the dark world of East Island overnight, which meant that East Island would become the sphere of influence of Emperor Dong's palace in the future. And East Island. There was complete evidence of the contact between Chen Fangqing and them. Call records. Every call record was enough to pose a fatal threat to Chen Fangqing. No one could imagine that East Island would lose so miserably, without any room to fight back. Now, with the end of the final battle in Beihai, all the contact between Chen Fangqing and East Island would be completely controlled by Emperor Dong's palace. Chen Fangqing knew what this meant. He lost. Moreover, he had lost everything he had. Chen Fangqing was at a loss now. From receiving the news to now, he had been sitting like this, smoking. He felt that he should think about something, but his mind was in a mess, and he couldn't think of anything. Guo Wentian came here 2 hours ago. Walking into Chen Fangqing's office, Guo Wentian, another tycoon of the Prince Group, didn't say anything. He just quietly accompanied him to smoke a whole pack of cigarettes. East Island. After a long silence, Guo Wentian finally said with deliberation, "How deeply are you involved?" Chen Fangqing glanced at him and didn't answer. No answer was an answer in itself. For the final battle in Beihai, he was as deeply involved as he could be with East Island. Wang Shengxiao and Li Tianlan didn't hide their killing intent to him from the beginning to the end. The storm in Haoyue Group, the death of his daughter and granddaughter, everything made the whole Chen family anxious. For this final battle, Chen Fangqing risked his reputation, the survival of the Chen family, and even the future of the Prince Group. How deeply involved? Chen Fangqing couldn't answer this question at all. This time, East Island used the war resources that hadn't been used for hundreds of years. It was no exaggeration to say that a considerable part of the reason was Chen Fangqing. Guo Wentian seemed to understand something, but also seemed to understand nothing. His voice was very light, with a touch of trembling. Can East Island still control the situation? Chen Fangqing smiled bitterly and said in a hoarse voice, "How? In this situation, East Island hates me to the core. Can I still count on East Island to keep the secret for me?" Guo Wentian was speechless. This final battle in Beihai made Beihai suffer unprecedented losses, and it also hurt the vitality of the whole East Island. The masters in the dark world withered, and the loss of the 3 fleets in the military was even more serious. Chen Fangqing might not be blamed for all this, but after losing the final battle, the whole upper class of East Island needed a channel to vent their anger. Chen Fangqing, the Prime Minister of Zhongzhou State, was undoubtedly the best channel. This time it was wrong. After a long silence, Guo Wentian said in a low voice. The muscles on Chen Fangqing's face twitched hard, and he bit the cigarette but hard. It's basically over in East Island. My Shiranui took Liuhua Palace to Li Tianlan. They are the last powerful martial arts sect in East Island. I got the text message about 20 minutes ago. That is to say, the power of the whole dark world in East Island has changed hands. Of the 46 martial arts sects, 30 were destroyed, and 16 surrendered. Guo Wentian shook his head slightly and continued. The royals of East Island have contacted Emperor Dong's palace. They want to cooperate, but it seems that Li Tianlan doesn't want to talk. If you want to talk, you can always talk. Chen Fangqing waved his hand. Li Tianlan can choose not to cooperate with the royals, but after all, he is in East Island, and he can't completely ignore the will of East Island. I think the same as you. Guo Wentian took a deep look at Chen Fangqing. Now I think the main reason why Li Tianlan doesn't talk is that East Island hasn't offered enough bargaining chips. What bargaining chips do you think they will offer to move Li Tianlan? A lot of things. Chen Fangqing twitched the corner of his mouth, as if he was laughing or crying, and his expression was extremely weird. I think, no matter how many things there are, at least the call records between me and East Island will be part of it. And it doesn't even need all of them. Just a few call records may be enough to prove that I committed treason. This time it was wrong. Guo Wentian said again. It's useless to say more. Chen Fangqing shook his head indifferently. Winner takes all. And it has been like this since ancient times. Guo Wentian stopped talking. Chen Fangqing took another big drag of the cigarette almost greedily, and suddenly asked, What are your plans? He knew why Guo Wentian came. He also knew that it was not easy for the other party to ask, so he just asked directly. The connection between him and East Island was very hidden. But no matter how hidden it was, it had happened now. It was impossible for no one inside the group to notice it, and it was impossible for no one in Zhongzhou State to notice it. Apart from other things, at least at the beginning of the final battle, Zhongzhou State directly blocked the internal communication of Beihai, which could not be explained. Beihai won. Then the prince group could only swallow the bitter fruit. And the biggest bitter fruit was undoubtedly going to be left to Chen Fangqing. Now the situation is more complicated. Guo Wentian was silent for a while, then shook his head slightly. Many comrades, including me, think that it's time for us to make some concessions. Even if it's a relatively big concession. Chen Fangqing looked at him and said nothing. You have to be mentally prepared. Guo Wentian said, and repeated that sentence for the third time. This time it was wrong. Chen Fangqing twitched the corner of his mouth and sneered. Wrong? What's wrong? You and I can see it, and everyone can see the impact that Beihai has made on Zhongzhou State over the years. No one can deny their contribution to Zhongzhou State, but contributions don't mean there are no disadvantages. It's imperative to contain Beihai, not only Beihai, but also Emperor Dong's palace. In Zhongzhou State, all the so-called superforces must obey the will of Zhongzhou State. Everything I did was what I should do in my position. Chen Fangqing pulled the necktie on his collar a little grumpily. He was silent for a while, then continued to say, I didn't do anything wrong. If I'm wrong, my only mistake is that I failed. That's all. Maybe in a few years, when Zhongzhou State can't bear it, what I did today will be done by someone else again. My only hope is that the other party can succeed. Guo Wentian smiled bitterly and lit another cigarette. Faint smoke rose in front of him. Guo Wentian was silent for a while, then said softly, Li Tianlan has entered the capital. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.